Could I just say good morning to everybody and welcome everybody into this morning's committee. The meeting is being recorded at this moment in time and is being live streamed. Just before we go into the committee, I just want to take a moment to just reflect. This week we reach a milestone of a full year since the country was first plunged into lockdown as the coronavirus took hold. The impact which threw our economy into a spiral of decline and has had a devastating human impact. A year on, while there are the beginnings of an awakening and stirrings of a movement to ease restrictions on our lives, as we crave to get back to the things we all enjoy, we cannot ignore the very raw impact that's been with us for some time and will continue to be so for some time to come. There are now over 213,888 people in Scotland who have sadly lost their lives to this cruel virus. Our heartfelt thoughts and special prayers go to all those families who have lost someone, particularly today as we mark the anniversary. We will pause today at 12 noon and join with the rest of the country to take a moment to remember all those who have passed and their families, including all those who have or are still suffering as a result of the virus. As well as reflecting and remembering those whom we have lost, there is an opportunity to again acknowledge the dedication of our frontline workers in the NHS, health and social care, and the wider public sector who have continued to care for our most vulnerable citizens and those that have kept the essential services going, often in very challenging circumstances. Not forgetting the contribution made by our third sector partners and the huge resilience that our communities have demonstrated in supporting the global response to this national emergency, which has undoubtedly saved lives. Their contribution and support to those affected by the pandemic will be critical to help aid recovery and help build back better, stronger, more resilient communities. My thanks too must also go to those who have willingly given their time and talents and volunteering to support the response in whatever way throughout the last year. Your contribution has been very much valued and appreciated, and I think it's right that we mark today's anniversary with very, very mixed feelings as we come to the positive coming out, but look at reflect on what's gone in the past. I would now invite Councillor Bissett and Councillor Kerr if they wish to just to say a few words at this point in order to mark today. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I would wholeheartedly echo everything you've said there. I think it has been a terrible year for everybody, and the impact it's had on families is just quite unbelievable, and the long-term health effects for people are going to be with them for some time. We are beginning to see the green shoots of recovery, and hopefully we've got a route map out of this. So we are hopeful for the future, and it's been an incredible collective effort. Humanity's pulled together to try and get through this, just in Scotland, the UK and globally. So yes, I think it's a fitting tribute that we have a minute of silence at 12 o'clock to remember those who are no longer with us and those who may no longer be with us in the future. Let's hope above hope that we see less and less deaths, and we've managed to get out of this, and people do come back to some sense of normality. Probably changed, probably perception and life changed, but very, very sad time, and my heart does go out to all those people who lost their lives. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Like yourself and Robert, echo your sentiments. There is people that have went over and above what's demanded of them, and it would be unfair to mention and single anybody out, because if you forget somebody, it'll be them do them a disjustice. So there is frontline people. There is people that are on the front line but have worked as hard through this pandemic as anybody else. So, as Robert says, hopefully with the roll out of the vaccine, and I would encourage anybody that's having any doubts, vaccine is a way to get out of this, and I would encourage them to think seriously about getting it, because it will benefit yourself, your family, and others about you. It hit home to me, convener, last week when I'd seen it on social media, and it was a page for Pocket Football Club, and it gave a list of people that were Pocket supporters, and there were a few people in there that were friends of mine, and it really hit home then, because nobody, I think nobody hasn't been affected by this, and coming together, hopefully, it'll pull a lot more people through. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr, and I will ask Jack just to keep a wee eye on the time and give me the heads up as we approach noon. We'll now move into this morning's business, and I will just ask if there's any apologies.
Yes, convener, there are apologies from John Chalmers.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. We have the minute of the meeting of the 26th of January, which is contained within your papers. First of all, are we happy to accept that as a true record?
Agreed?
Yep.
Agreed.
Is there anything particular on the minute that anybody would wish any brief feedback on that's not contained within this morning's agenda? No. Thank you. It takes us to the rolling action log, which is pages 12 to 16. Is there anything relating to the action log that MD wishes to ask a question on? Nope. No. Okay, thank you. It brings us to our first presentation of the morning about the Enhanced Transitions Pilot, and we have a number of people who are going to contribute, including colleagues from Scottish Government. So I will hand over to is it Vivian that's going to take us through this, or David, do you want to speak first?
Sorry, convener. I think it's Vivian that's taking us through this one.
Okay, Vivian, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're going to make this a kind of joint effort here, so I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then colleagues from ARC and the Scottish Government will take you through the presentation. Kerry Drennan from Education will finish that bit off, and then we hope to have a small amount of time for questions at the end from anything that members might want to be asking. So first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come along today and to do this presentation on transitions. I'm aware that it has been a topic of conversation at this committee and predecessor committees on quite a number of occasions, and is a topic which is dear to the heart of many members here. So we are particularly delighted excuse me, to be here. And this is one of a series of places that we are coming to just to really share the good news that Falkirk is going to be one of, and is not going to be, we have started, is one of 2 national pilot, enhanced pilot areas, looking at how we put the transitions of the principles of good transitions into practice. And we will say just a little bit about that, you know, in the moment. As I said, it's been a focus for some time. There's been a lot of work going into that. Members will remember that we have been able to put into place a transitions coordinator to try and enhance the process for youngsters with additional needs, you know, from the age of 14 moving them through into adulthood and trying to make that a much smoother and more young person centred journey than sadly it has always been in the past. And the pilot that we are now part of is very much looking at how the principles of good transition can be put into practice. It's given us an opportunity over the next 2 years to really pilot how we make that work for children and for young people. The pilot very much fits with the vision that we have got as a council, and along with partners to make sure that young people are at the heart of what happens in transitions, to make sure that some of the bumps and the bips and the people that fall through the cracks, that doesn't happen, that this is an area where there's a standard of excellence that can be shared and then can be rolled out across the country. So we were absolutely delighted that we are one of 2 pilots along with Dundee who will be working on this. And what we want to do today is just to share a little outline really of what the pilot is going to entail, with a commitment that we will come back at a later point and share more details. One of the reasons we haven't got the details today is that we will be engaging very much with families and young people. They will help us to work out what parts and which ones of the principles that we will begin to pilot and we will work on, because the commitment is very much that they are front and centre of everything that we are going to do, including piloting the Compass app, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a moment. We will be measuring our progress. We will be using the improvement methodology to do that, and colleagues in the Scottish Government are going to be assisting us in doing that. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah Hampson from the Scottish Government and Rebecca Williams from ARC, who have been giving us tremendous support in helping us to kick off the pilot, and they will outline a little more of that and then hand over to Kerry, and then we'll take some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Does that look okay? Thanks, Vivian. I can see you still on the screen. I'm Beck Williams. I'm a policy and development worker at ARC Scotland, and I co-facilitate the Scottish Transitions Forum. So the aim of the forum is to improve the experiences of young people aged 14 to 25 who require additional support and who are making that transition to young adult life. So we have over 1,000 members from all sectors, including health, social work, education, third sector, and of course, parents and carers and young people themselves. So I'm going to pass on to Sarah for this one.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Sarah Hampson, and I'm the team leader in the Support to Disabled Children's and Young People's team in the Children and Families Director in the Scottish Government. Scottish Government are funding and also supporting ARC Scotland with the delivery of this programme and also the evaluation of the programme. And as Vivian mentioned as well, so we've got the support from ourselves in the policy team, but also the support from the Children and Young People's Improvement Collaborative, otherwise known as CYPIC, which you may have heard, as we're going to definitely bring the improvement methodology to this programme. So just quickly, why is this Principles into Practice programme being introduced? So Scottish Government are committed to improving lived experiences of children and young people who require additional support, and particularly at the times of transitions, and particularly at the time of those transitions where young people are starting to think about moving on from school and into young adult life. We know that there's been quite a bit of difficulty in terms of transitions for this group of young people. There's been a large body of evidence to suggest that it can be particularly problematic for young people with additional support needs, and we're absolutely keen to make change happen. We see this programme as really, I guess, providing a mechanism to create and deliver collective solutions with the local authority areas that are taking part in the programme, and then to be able to drive good practice and to share good practice across Scotland. So this is our strategic driver diagram. I'm not going to go into all the detail of this, but basically this driver diagram articulates our theory of what needs to be put in place in order to achieve more positive lived experiences of transitions for young people. And as Vivian said as well, key to this programme of change is involving young people, their parents, carers, frontline practitioners, everyone that works with the young people in this programme. So our aim is that most 14 to 25-year-olds who require additional support as they make the transition to young adult life will report positively about their experience. And we're going to explore further with the young people and the parents and carers what we actually mean by a positive experience, because that's going to be unique to all young people, but it really needs to come from them rather than what we think as professionals is a positive experience. The secondary drivers that you can see there are basically the principles of good transitions, and that's what we're testing to see if they work when we put those principles into practice. Will it achieve that aim? And our primary drivers are basically to be able to fulfill that aim. We want to see a coordinated and collaborative system, and also a person-centred and rights-based approach, and basically using the improvement methodology to improve that aim.
Thanks, Sarah. So several years ago now, we published the Principles of Good Transitions 3, and this identified 7 key principles that provide a framework to support the coordination of transition planning and support. So these have been widely endorsed. They've been referenced in many Scottish Government policies, informed local planning and practice, which is all great, but we're still hearing from young people and families across the country who are having a really difficult experience of transitions. And at the same time, we're still hearing from health and social care partnerships who are really struggling with how they coordinate and plan support for young people at this critical time in their lives. So over the past 2 years, in consultation with young people, parents and carers and professionals, we've developed principles into practice. So this is a draft national framework to support the practical implementation of those 7 principles of good transition. It offers practical guidance and evaluation measures to improve planning and delivery and support for young people as they make that transition. So within the framework for each principle, we've just provided descriptors for how local planning and practice might look across 3 categories: assessing, improving and delivering. So for each principle, we've sought to identify and define the essential elements on which sound planning and practice should be built, but it's not exhaustive, and this will develop as the trials progress. So you'll see from this example that the only way that an area could assess that they're in that delivering column is if they're receiving that feedback directly from young people and parents and carers, and they have that evidence. So to do this, you obviously need a robust way to continually gather that feedback. And we've developed a web-based application called Compass to help you do this. And I'll talk you through that in a moment. So why use principles into practice? Well, it's going to enable you to empower more young people to reach their potential, provide families with the support they need, and address those long-running challenges associated with providing effective transition support. So as Sarah said, with support from the Scottish Government officials, we'll be trialling principles in practice in 10 participating local authority areas over 2 years. And of these 10, 2 have been selected to undertake an in-depth trial with greater support from ourselves and Falkirk and Dundee in those 2 areas. So by the end of this trial period, we'll have a fully developed and tested framework and evaluation resources, and these will be made available to every local authority area across Scotland. So Compass is our web-based application, and we've developed this in partnership with groups of young people and parents and carers. So there's 2 versions, 2 prototypes. The one you're seeing here is the parent and carer version. It's designed to guide and support families through that transition process, which is several years before the young person leaves school, is due to leave school, right the way through to a couple of years after they've left school, covering that whole period, by providing relevant information at appropriate times and signposting them onto other resources. As well as providing information, it enables them to provide feedback on their experiences so that services and support can be improved. So the questions we ask within this feedback part of the app link directly back to that delivering column that you saw before. The young person's version of the app is going to look and function very differently based around what they want, but I don't have pictures of that to show you just yet. But both prototypes are going to be trialled initially with those 2 enhanced trial areas before being made more widely available. So we've also provided, well, we've got a 1-page document, Vivian, I think we're going to make that available, which has further information, further details, and also a link to our microsite, which again has a lot more information for you there. But just to reiterate what Vivian said, this is just the beginning of quite a long journey together, and we'll come back and share progress as we go. Go ahead over to Kerry, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kerry Drinnan, ASN Service Manager and one of the 3 Falkirk Council project leads. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our current progress and our next steps. So we've created a steering group with representatives from across children's services, for example, social work, children with disabilities team, educational service, the ASN service, adult services, partners from health and the third sector. And there's a lot of interest in making our transitions progress and process a lot better and smoother for families and young people. So there's a lot of people who are very willing to be involved in this. We're launching the project obviously by communicating with all relevant groups across the authority so that they're aware of our project and can hopefully support us with it. The steering group has also issued a practitioner survey across the groups who are involved in our steering group to benchmark understanding and knowledge about what makes a good transition, which will help inform our improvement planning journey. And as Vivian said, we are being really well supported by our Scottish Government colleagues to better understand the improvement planning and putting this into practice to ensure better experiences and outcomes for our young people and families so they make a successful transition to their young adult lives. Our next step is to plan our engagement with young people and parents, and that's really to ensure that partnership approach to making improvements that matter most to young people and families. And our work with ARC and the Compass app is really going to feed into that work. So thank you for listening to our presentation today, and we're now ready to take any questions.
Okay, thank you to the team for the presentation. I think you know, being involved in the pilot is a great opportunity for us, not just to improve the experience for our young people and our families, but to be able to have real influence and help develop that good practice going forward. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. We have around 10 minutes for questions. So if people can be reasonably concise in what they're asking by way of any further information, this will come back to us with a bit more detail as it develops, because this is an early stage, but wanted members of the committee to be aware of it and be aware of the work that's ongoing. So there may not be the detail that you're perhaps looking for today, but it is going to develop further and it will come back. But I'll open it up to any members for any questions just now. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, just a quick question, convener, and thanks very much for the presentation. It was a very interesting presentation. It was mentioned that it's a long journey. Now, obviously, this is just a pilot. Do we have any indication as to how long this long journey is likely to take at this point? Thanks, convener.
Is this for the length of the pilot itself, you mean?
Yeah, well, the pilot will do, yeah.
Yeah, so we officially began in December last year. Obviously, like with everything else, COVID affected our timelines. We'd planned to start a bit earlier. So December was the beginning. So we've got a 2-year period that we plan to develop this, working alongside Falkirk and Dundee and the other 8 areas as well. I have to say that we're not, given the current context we're all working in, we're very flexible in terms of how our involvement with the other kind of 8 universal areas, the ones we're calling universal, are going to be. So things might look different as we go through that 2-year period, and it's definitely learning by doing. We're going to be developing this together as we go along. This isn't a project where we get to the end of 2 years and we produce a nice fancy report and then let everyone know what we learned. We're going to be sharing that learning across the areas and more broadly as we go together.
Okay, thanks for that, Rebecca, and I look forward to future reports coming to the committee. Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Just to add to that as well, I think the improvement methodology is a way of looking at testing changes quite quickly. So it's really, I guess, the beginning of this journey is really helping Falkirk to, well, I guess, build will for change. But I think there's a lot of will for change within Falkirk and the partnership. And I think the next thing then is really starting to understand the system. So Falkirk have done a self-evaluation based on the principles to kind of self-evaluate where they are just now. And looking at those principles, and I think there could be some principles and there could be some quick changes And I guess the plan with the improvement methodology is to really test some changes, and those that work, to adopt those very quickly. So I guess as Beck said, it's not that we spend 2 years doing something and then produce a report. This is going to be a very dynamic and active programme over the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. I've got Can Procheck and then Councillor Kerr.
Hi there, good morning. Thank you. As a parent who will hopefully benefit from this, my son's only 9, so once this is up and running, I am really looking forward to this in the future. My question was to Kerry. I noticed when you were talking about the steering group, it's very professional led at this point. There are no parents or carers on it. I think what you said was, it sounded like it was professionals to then come to parents and carers. I'm just wondering, is there no benefit of having parents in at the beginning, because they're obviously going to be the experts to tell you what hasn't worked rather than the professionals deciding that? It was just I thought.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. And it was really just to get the people together to make sure that we had that joined up approach, and that we had people committed to it from across all the services. And our next step is to engage with families. But yes, we do, once we've started to engage with families, we will have young people and parents on our steering group. And so that there will be that level of consultation and work. And at the moment, we've got our transitions coordinator for Falkirk Council currently working with families who've gone through transition at the other end and are feeding back what their experience was like to us. So we've got a wee focus group that will help inform that and allow us to ask the right questions of our families when we engage with them. And our next step is definitely to engage with our parents and then start to have regular consultations and definitely involve them in our steering group. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr, then I think it was Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, convener. Like Councillor Nimmo, I thought it was very fascinating. I'm glad that Falkirk's been chosen as one of the pilots, and that we have recognised that young adults are all different, and some of them do have other needs. My question is, it was mentioned what is a positive experience. Have we got a positive experience that we know that, well, that's what a positive experience will be, or will every young adult's positive experience be different?
Well, yeah, I'll answer that one. Amongst the group of parents that Kerry referred to, there are some parents who have had a good experience and there are some parents who have had a less good experience. So there's quite a range there. So, we know what the things are which those couple of parents are actually saying that worked for us, that was the thing that made a difference for us. However, every young person's situation and experience is going to be different. And we're testing principles, and principles and practice will not always be the same for every young person. So the challenge for us is that actually we have a system that lets the young person, the family, manage that journey from childhood into adulthood in a way that meets their needs best, but which also meets each of these principles. So there will be differences, but there are some things that will be the same for everyone that takes that particular journey. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Thanks, convener.
Okay, I think Councillor Alexander, and I think that maybe be all we've got time for this morning. Once we've had Councillor Alexander.
I'll step aside if there's someone else who wants to take the last question.
There's no one else indicated at this time.
Councillor Reid.
Councillor Reid. Okay,
Well,
Councillor Alexander, I'll take your question and Councillor Reid, but after that we will need to move on.
Okay, I'll be very, very brief. What were the main qualities that attracted you to Falkirk?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Sorry, a bit too brief. What were the main factors that you decided Falkirk to be one of the two local authorities as part of this pilot?
There was a number of different things we asked for areas putting forward their interest. They had to complete what we called a site readiness questionnaire, which was an adapted version of that framework that you saw a little bit of on my slides. And that's to indicate kind of where they felt things were going well in terms of the principles getting embedded into practice, or where were the really tricky areas where they knew improvement was needed. So that kind of helped us get a sense of where people were at. And also those questions around capacity. We know that currently, especially everyone is really stretched. So people, there needed to be acknowledgement that, this would take a bit of time and effort and resources, and maybe a bit of protected time. We needed, we needed 2 people to be leading on this, one from adult services, one from children's services, to make sure there was that joint buy-in. So they needed to be at a place where they're kind of ready to go with our support. Sarah, was there anything else that you can think of that we're really looking for in those applications?
No, I think you've covered most things there. Yeah, like I say, we just looked at the site readiness questionnaire and the self-evaluation questionnaire, and then spoke a wee bit more. But yeah, I think again, particularly as Beck says, within the context of where we are as well, we didn't want someone that was at right beginning of a journey. We didn't want someone that was at the end of the journey. And I think the self-evaluation questionnaire and the work that Falkirk had already started on just seemed a really good place to build on.
Thank you.
Okay, and last question from Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just one quick comment. I think you should introduce parents to your system as soon as possible, picking up the parents' point. Secondly, what would be viewed as a positive destination for these people, these young people? It used to be that they went to the college, for example, for a course, and were still going to the college in their 30s and 40s. They hadn't found a job, but they were viewed as being a positive destination.
I think that's a really interesting point. When we speak to young people, we work alongside young people. A positive destination is somewhere that they want to be and they feel passionate about and interested and engaged and excited about. So I know, we normally think of it as being employment, education, training, and for good reasons, but actually sometimes young people want something a bit different. And what we really advocate strongly throughout the principles is a person-centered approach to planning, supporting those young people to really think about what it is that they enjoy, what their strengths are, of course, what their support needs are as well, what kind of environment they need to be safe and thrive. But we have to think creatively also about, what options are out there, and make sure that we don't restrict kind of young people's potential because we're looking at just what services are available. This is a big tricky questions though, and it's something that there's no easy fix, but making sure that a young person is engaged in that planning process and supported to really be thinking about what kind of future is a good future for them. I think that's where we'll find out, they'll tell us then what their positive destination is.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, and thank you to Sarah, Rebecca, Vivian and Kerry. We look forward to a further iteration of this report coming forward, and seeing the progress of the pilot as well. So thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move into our first part, which is part A of education functions, and we do have a full agenda and a further presentation at the other end. I know that members will be interested to know how the back to school has gone and how it looks to progress as the full return after Easter. I have, however, asked the director in light of that, us having a very full agenda today, to perhaps prepare a written briefing that could be circulated by email to members, rather than spending a lot of time today. But I want to acknowledge that I appreciate members are will look for information, and will look to provide it in a different way on this occasion. So if we can move into our next section, and we have our statutory item, the Early Learning and Childcare 1140 expansion update, and the enthusiastic Mr Greenhorn. And Gary.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Convener. And I'm really pleased to bring forward hopefully another positive report to the Executive this morning. Section 1.1 outlines the key areas that we're intending to update the Executive on today. In Section 2, I offer an apology, Convener, and to the rest of the Executive, that the recommendation 216 is erroneous. A gremlin crept into the quality control and it should be removed. That recommendation is already included in 213 before I'm politely reminded of that from the Executive members today. So there's 6 recommendations this morning. In terms of the background in the local context, they're very much the same. The focus of the local context is now shift very much to sleeves rolled up to deliver the projects over the course of the summer, the remaining projects, and to get the final implementation plans done as soon as we can in this calendar year. Some exciting considerations before members today. In terms of the section 4.1, it provides an update. We've got one project that's now complete, St Francis, and we've got 2 that are very near completion. I had hoped to say that this morning they would be complete, but they're nearing completion. They'll be completed in the next week or so, certainly before the schools come back after Easter. So that being said, 18 would remain, and 4 of the 18 are minor works for minor external landscaping. As the weather's changed, we're hoping to get that work done as quickly as we can, and that would bring the numbers down further. Update in section 4.2, Falkirk's the largest authority of the 5 pilot authorities for deferred places, so hopefully we can bring some expertise round the table to help influence future policy. The working group's been set up. In terms of section 4.3, a number of positive engagements here. Before I start, what I would say is that some of the challenges that are faced just now, and it alludes to some of the presentations earlier on, is that in terms of the COVID situation, a lot of families are experiencing COVID financial and economic insecurity, and that's bringing with it a number of things: a rise in the demand for eligible 2 places for those families who qualify for eligible 2 places through benefit qualification, and also our social work colleagues are experiencing an increasing in the number of referrals for families that are asking for support around insecurity, vulnerability, etc. So that's very much predicated on some of the phased approaches we've taken today, and I'll develop that as we go through it. So phase 1, we agreed to support for learnings and assistance expansion last time. I'm pleased to say that recruitment is well underway with that. First proposal before the Executive today is outlined in section 432. And this proposal is to create a small team of 3 family support workers with a primary focus on ELC. This is going to target the whole family support agenda, the positive parenting agenda. The aim would be that it would link with the current family support service and all the other professional staff engaged in early learning, and that may include external providers as well, such as the NHS. Very much ties into the positive closer to home strategy, and GIRFEC is at the heart of what we're trying to do here. So a very positive move there that will reinforce early intervention at the heart of what we do. Phase 3 is a proposal to increase capacity for 2-year-olds. I mentioned earlier on in terms of a horizon scan, and the demand for eligible 2s is expected to increase. We expect this to be a temporary increase, and probably linked to also the end of the furlough scheme. The end of the furlough scheme, we anticipate some more families may move into benefit, hopefully for a short-term period, but in that short-term period, any 2-year-olds will become eligible for a place. When we did the initial crystal ball gazing and planning, we weren't factoring in the COVID situation, how it becomes a reality, and we've got to make sure that any opportunities we can find to make sure we can increase statutory provision to cope with that short-term spike, we take steps positively and proactively to do it. The other proposal before members today is we know that the Kinglass Early Years Childcare Centre That, when it comes on stream, will provide another 15 places that will help support the 2-year-old capacity. And we're asking permission today to do some work to further increase that by a further 15 places at Langleys by some internal works which can be funded from our capital programme. That being said, if it's accepted, that would increase the 2-year-old capacity to just under 300. And the challenge we do have is half of that capacity has been met with paying customers and half is for statutory provision. So we've got to try to make sure we can, where possible, increase the statutory element to cope with the demand that we expect to face going forward. Phase 4, another exciting proposal. And again, it's very much tied into increasing statutory capacity in our provision. The proposal here is that across the 7 ELC centres we've currently got 57 baby places. The challenge we have is that we've got a statutory underpinning to make sure we meet our statutory demand, albeit some of that may be short term. So the proposal here is that we would try, where possible, to earmark 27 of those 57 places to cope with the statutory demand that we face, statutory demand coming from eligible twos, and to provide baby places that may support our colleagues in the children and family social work for trying to find baby provision for short-term referrals that they may have from vulnerable or families facing any kind of insecurity at all. Just to reassure members, there is no indication here that we're going to effectively put any babies out that are currently in fee-paying places. This is very much when a fee-paying place becomes empty, we will try to earmark that place for statutory provision. Again, I would have to stress that we don't quite know what the demand would be, but I think it's absolutely right that we do that to protect the statutory provision that we do need and we think we'll need going forward, and we'll report back to the executive at a future date insofar as that demand and supply is concerned. So I would ask that you give that consideration in terms of another positive proposal, absolutely embedded in the heart of the early intervention strategies that we want to do. In terms of the future phases, and it was raised very positively at the executive in past meetings, we are looking currently at how we engage community childminders, particularly in some of the rural and outlying areas. I know that's been a challenge that some of you have contacted us personally and raised at this meeting before, and also further engagement with the psychological services team. So that those two elements will come to future meetings with the proposals. 436 outlines an exciting pilot project that's underway, and this is to create a single initial response team set up so that a single point of contact can be made for all social work referrals. That means that effectively it will also include child protection referrals, and it means that the social workers that effectively are used for that can make sure that the calls are recorded, professional advice is given, and more importantly, it can be earmarked quickly to the appropriate teams, either in schools, early establishments, social work localities, or the specialist social work teams that we've got set up. So effectively, it's that single point of contact. Again, very much at the start of the closer to home strategies, recording it and making sure that they get the professional support fairly quickly. Again, GIRFEC is also at the heart of that we're trying to do. That project itself would involve 4 social workers and some management support as well. I'm very pleased to say that the cost of those proposals before the executive this morning are met from the 450,000 that were earmarked at previous meetings for our early intervention strategies, and that received so much support from everyone in the past. I'm also pleased to say that the government have extended what was the old transitional relief fund outlined in section 4.4 to a temporary restrictions fund, and this supports our private sector nurseries and out-of-school care partners that have remained open during the current times. £80,000 being given to us. We are acting as administrators as we did for the previous scheme, and we're also getting a £2,000 administration fee to cope with the payments to support the PVI sector and those that have remained open. The scale of the grants and they'll be awarded range from £575 to £2,800, and it's based entirely on the capacity, registered capacity of the establishments. As mentioned at a previous executive, very positive workforce update reports contained in Appendix 3, showing 650 FTE. and that's an FT figure. It's not the actual per capita per head figure, which will be a lot more than that. So that shows you, and it's broken down from our frontline staff to our central teams. And I thank each and every one of you for the support that you've given to us as we go through this process and increase the workforce that we've got in that particular area. In terms of Section 6, the financial resources, in terms of the revenue, we're now almost at the financial year end. The projection I gave the last time, I'm very pleased to say, for revenue has really stayed the same. And for capital, we expected by the year end an increase of 300,000 from last reported to the executive. I'm also pleased to say that all the monies there can be carried forward. They're entirely ring fenced and there is no risk for any money not being spent at the year end. In conclusion, I would say that the COVID position remains a risk. We've had one instance of on-site a subcontractor unfortunately into liquidation, which has hampered a couple of things. However, whilst the COVID position remains a challenge, the officers at the centre and in development services and indeed other areas of the council remain absolutely with their sleeves rolled up to make sure we get this project successfully across the line and delivered within budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Another very full and very positive report. I'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks very much, Gary. I really welcome this update this morning. As you can see through Gary's presentation there of the report, that it firmly puts our children, our youngest children, right in the heart of our plans going forward. And I, for one, really appreciate that we have focused on that and focused on GORVEC and the new service that Gary highlighted there, and the different plans for family support, for support for learning, is definitely highlighting the fact that we are very serious about supporting our most vulnerable children and their families that are struggling at the point of need. So I move this report with great enthusiasm and going forward excitement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Murtagh.
Absolutely, and I think given what Councillor McHugh said and the fullness of Gary's report, I'll formally second and reserve the right to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. I'll open it up for any member for any questions or comments. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions for Gary, and well done with the report, Gary. Another very full report. Thanks for that. There's a section contained in the report at 4.6 headed up Workforce Update. Now, I'm just wondering, obviously in the wake of COVID and everything that's happened, there's obviously been implications for our registered childminders in private nurseries that have been involved in providing the childcare. Do we have any feedback in relation to the effects on them? And obviously, how are they going to cope with any increased demand with us coming out of COVID and going back to work? Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nimmo. And again, that's a really interesting and challenging question. Just to reassure you and the rest of the executive is that whilst we have had COVID affecting a couple of areas within the sector, there's been nothing major reported from childminders insofar as impacting on the service that they provide. However, the second part to your question is when we come out of COVID, how they're going to remain and how they're going to increase effectively the capacity they've got. Members will recall that we've got a contract with the Scottish Childminding Association and we work in partnership with them, and it's them that make sure they try to bring additional childminders in to the Falkirk area so that we can increase capacity and offer parents the proper choices that suit their own work-life balances that we intend to do. And partly it's going to be linked to that. We'll be looking at community childminding, as I mentioned earlier on, as another exciting development to that arm of it, and that will come to a future report, Councillor Nimmo.
Just as a follow-up, Convener, just very quickly, Gary, relation to the workforce update at 4.6, there's 650 FTEs. Does that include the private sector? Does it include registered childminders, for instance?
No, it's purely workforce insofar as employed by Falkirk Council. Councillor
Right.
no.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. I've got Evelyn Crosby now. Evelyn, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. That's great.
Can I ask about the families where the children, the babies who are 2 years old, if the family financial position improves after furlough, will those 2-year-olds get to stay in the system?
Again, Evelyn, it's a really good question, and again, that poses the challenge that we do face, because we expect families to move in and out of benefits if the furlough scheme in as we go through the response to the pandemic. But just to give you an assurance that if a 2-year-old goes in because of eligibility criteria, they remain in the system right through. They will not be displaced at all, and that's part of why we're trying to create that extra capacity in the system to cope with that increased demand.
Thank you.
Okay, Maureen. Maureen, you're still on mute.
I know.
That's you now. You're sorry, you're back on mute.
That's it.
Yeah, that's you.
I think I need to go on a course for retired teachers. When I read over this report, I was gobsmacked. It was just music to my ears, and it made me actually want to go back to school, but then I changed my mind. But Gary, a work of art, all of these interventions are coming together. It's a very forward thinking and intuitive thing that you've done, I can't think. And you're also taking cognizance of external factors that are having an impact now. You're not just sitting back and then, what do we do now? You're actually way ahead of the game. And I like the fact that it's linking to lots of Falkirk Council, closer to home initiatives and other things. Wonderful, great, thank you. I will unmute.
Thank you, Maureen. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I'd just like to thank Gary for his report as well. I mentioned I've had this conversation with Gary before about the child minding places, which is a challenge in my area because there are a lot of small villages that haven't got that privilege. So I understand the statutory position we are in for the baby places. I understand that, but these places are key for working families as well, where they need these, and there's got to be in some places where one child in the family is getting looked after in the early learning centre, but the brother or sister has to go somewhere else. And I know we can't just do it because it's family, but these these areas are important to these other families as well. So the childminding thing is key for some of the areas that I represent, and hopefully we can encourage some to come up the braes to help these families. So thanks for the report, Gary. Thank you.
Could I just say, Councillor Kerr, that to reassure you, we're doing a bit of work that will look at the geographic location of childminders insofar as the outlying areas and some of the proposals that are in the paper. We will continually make sure we monitor demand. What we don't want to do is in any way disadvantage any of our outlying areas in particular, and we've had that conversation before. So we remain on track to look at it, and we will look at it as I said we would do, and hopefully we'll bring a report back that shows just where we've got the childminders and working. We've really got to work in partnership with the PVI sector to create that capacity so that they can provide the baby places, the toddler places, either in a private nursery or indeed through childminders, and that's the bit of work that we're undertaking just now because it's a completely partnership arrangement within Falkirk. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, I've got Councillor Bissett, Councillor Reid and Councillor Colley. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. Once again, I'd like to thank Gary for a very comprehensive report, and he's on target to get things delivered in the coming year. Certainly COVID has held things up. And I was glad to see at 4.3.2 the family support and positive parenting section where we're going to create 3 full-time equivalent family support workers, which the whole report chimes with the GIFVEC principles, which is, I mean, every kid deserves a good chance in life, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I just wondered if on 4.3.4, prioritisation of available baby places to meet statutory need. I wonder if Gary could maybe just explain the difference between what was in the budget for the re-provision of non-statutory baby and toddler places. That one was rejected. So I wonder if you could just explain the difference between the statutory need and the non-statutory need, if you like. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best, Councillor Bissett. What was in the budget, Councillor Bissett, was effectively, because we're focused on statutory places, so what was in the budget was a proposal to remove all non-statutory elements of it. So if that proposal went ahead, we'd be taking out all the baby places and all the non-statutory provision for the 2-year-old, the paying customers that we have in the system. So that was the budget proposal. So the proposal that's before us today is to simply to try to realign it, to recognise there's got to be a balance between the paying customers for babies and toddlers, and also a balance to provide the statutory element of it. And as I said earlier on, what we have got now is the COVID situation is upon us, and we are expecting and we're seeing an increase in 2 things: social work referrals for families that are vulnerable, or they're experiencing insecurity and they may need a short-term place or short-term support. We need to create space for that, and we also need to create space for the increase in demand that we see for the eligible 2-year-olds, which are entirely linked to families that are eligible for benefits. Hopefully that will be a short term as we go over the pandemic and we move to full recovery. But again, because it's a statutory underpinning, we've got to make sure that we can do and fulfil our statutory duties. Hope that answers it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid and Councillor Colley.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just to reiterate the praise for Gary's report. And like Maureen, particularly pleased to see the early intervention being introduced almost a decade after the Christie Commission reported. But it was always going to be a very gradual progress. Just 2 factual questions, and it's on the TRF, which used to be the TSF. Sounds like line of duty to some extent. TRF, was all the money used up? Yeah, the applications that were rejected.
Again, a good question, Councillor Reid. All the partner providers put an application in the last time, and they were all paid exactly what they were due. This time, I'll have to check, but I think we were chasing 1 or 2 up just at the end of before the phase 1, phase one of the new scheme to make sure we got everyone in. I'm sure we did. The first tranche of payments were made, and there are second tranche of payments about to be made. But again, everyone that within the establishments that remain open will get their payment, because we work very closely with them and make sure that we help them with any of the administration challenges that they may have when they're working remotely at times.
Just a second question. As we know, all over the world, gender preconceptions are being done away with, and quite rightly so. How many males applied for the jobs in ELC? Just as a
Again, good question, Councillor Reid. I certainly can't tell you how many males applied for it. What I can tell you is that within our workforce, we've got roughly 2.5% of males, so we've probably got around 15 FTE male equivalents in early year posts out that out the figure there. So roughly 2.5%, and we are always working very closely to try to increase that in a positive manner.
It's just obviously there persists this perception that looking after kids is for women, but it's not the case. Yeah.
No, and
So
we've got many good examples of our male colleagues doing really well, and especially up. I know one or two, especially up in Councillor Kerr's neck of the woods as well, because I've been doing visits. I've saw the good practice that goes on. So certainly, 2.5% of the workforce is male.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colley.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. I mean, I think I just want to heartily welcome the work around early intervention and supporting families. I think that probably to put on record the amount of work that has happened over the pandemic, including new services that have been launched, including the Families Information and Support Line, precisely to do that, to support people and children and young people and their parents at the earliest possible stage. I think the pilot projects that are outlined in this paper are extremely exciting, and I think the work on Closer to Home has been excellent, and I think it has given Falkirk a really firm foundation to try and meet the aspirations of the promise, and I think Sarah and her team and across Children's Services should be commended for that work, and I look forward to seeing how this work in early years develops since. So thank you very much, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Colley. Are we happy and content to accept the report?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, it's Falkirk Community Learning and Development Annual Update and Action Plan. And I'm not. I know that we've got Mark. Gary, you're going to take it, right? It's a big screen today, a lot of people, and I'm not seeing terribly well who's waving at me, so apologies, Gary.
No problem, Convener. I'm going to take you through the paper, and our CLD manager, Mark Meakin's in attendance, because Mark will give you the operational answers to any questions that are raised. So, purpose of the report, this is members may recall, we agreed a 3-year action plan for CLD a couple of years ago, covering the period 2018 to 21. The purpose of today is to provide a progress update on year 2 of that. Year 2 runs from September 19 through to September 20. 3 recommendations are outlined in section 2 before the executive today. In terms of section 3, it outlines the background position. It looks at the statutory underpinning the framework at a national level. It looks at timelines where the government have brought in other guidance for CLD, and it brings into play in section 3.5 the local position insofar as it affects the impact on local authorities. The focus of CLD has been drastically altered, as we mentioned earlier on, because of the COVID pandemic over the course of the year, and the impact it's had on CLD. We mentioned earlier on about the resilience communities. the extending to get volunteers and very much partnership working across all the third sector and Falkirk, including Falkirk CVS. I think that was alluded to in your introductory remarks, convener. So this is the challenge that CLD have faced. In terms of section 4, it looks at some of the considerations around that and the impact of COVID. It mentions vulnerable families. Very much CLD have been working with other council services and partners to try to support it. Digital poverty is coming to the fore, and CLD are working with a number of partners, including schools. The Connected Falkirk paper later on shows the interface of how we're trying to challenge and move ahead and get out of the digital poverty experience that we're in, and also financial insecurity. It's recognised widely that CLD across this phase have been key workers, and the government have said that in a lot of the guidance, and it's been pronounced in a number of statements. There's 8 examples in section 4.1 of positive actions taken by CLD and indeed the private and voluntary sector, who themselves remain very much at the heart of this recovery process. Without that interface with the communities and the public sector, this could not have worked. The examples of where progress has been made, and this is where we did take the feedback from the last exec, if you remember, that whilst the report was good, you criticise us for having a report that was too much detail in it. So what we tried to do is bring a report that was a bit more succinct for the progress on year 2. So just a reminder that for those of you that haven't looked up on it, there's 15 agreed action areas in the 3-year action plan, and rather than report on 15, what we tried to do was select 6 across 3 individual themed areas there outlined in section 4.2, and the progress that's been made against 6 is in the appendix to the report. Some of the other relevant indicators, just to mention to the executive, and it's a challenge that we have here, is data, data, data. You hear that from the clinicians nationally and locally, and within the CLD sector, unfortunately, there is no national performance indicators. Looking at the success that Falkirk Council's got in the recent publication of the local government benchmarking frameworks, I would like CLD to be in there in the upper quartile singing their praise, but unfortunately there's none just now. So Mark, in conjunction with his colleagues in CLD Manager Scotland, are looking at that, how we address it and how we bring in to play those benchmarking indicators so we can measure that as we go through the coming years. So that work is underway just now. In terms of future plans, we hope to bring back, well, not we hope, we will be bringing back a report later in the year that summarises the progress that we make, successful progress we hope in phase in year 3, which will cover the period September 20 to September 21. And also at the same time, we'll present the executive with the next exciting 3-year action plan that covers CLD that takes us up to 2024. So in summary, I would just to say that the crucial role that the partners in the voluntary sector and all the aspects of council services played, CLD among them, we couldn't have made the positive steps in terms of the emergency food programme, the distribution of food out to the various pantries and kitchen networks in Falkirk to help sustain and provide support to vulnerable families. Without that interface, CLD were at the heart of it. And Mark's here to helpfully answer any questions on the report itself. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Gary. And I think that crucial point that you made at the end there about the contribution of CLD along with other third sector and voluntary partners in enabling our communities to deliver the fantastic response has to be acknowledged. And I certainly give my thanks to all the staff who have enabled that to happen. They just got the sleeves rolled up and got on with it. So absolutely, and I would ask that you take that back to the wider staff as well. But I'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for just reading out my speech there. I'd like to echo everything that Councillor Meiklejohn has just said. I think we can all recognise that the work of CLD in our communities during this most difficult time, and as Cecil and Gary has said, they got their sleeves up and they got on with it. think CLD is crucial in drawing all the different services together within our communities. And I for one know that in my community, the CLD worker has been definitely priceless. He's been fantastic at helping the different volunteers that have came forward, and he's been a great link between all the different community groups within my ward. So I totally appreciate everything that CLD are doing. And going forward, some of the projects that has been highlighted in the report is heartwarming, you could say, and given me the reassurance, and hopefully everyone else in the community, that we're moving forward with the best intentions of our communities yet again at our heart, which in turn obviously has a huge impression on our residents and constituents. So thank you for the report. And Mark, can you please take back my thanks to all your staff as well, because we totally appreciate the work, putting themselves again on the front line and putting themselves in danger's way, you could say, to help in their communities. So totally appreciate them. Thank you. And I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh, and apologies for stealing your thunder. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Convener. Just a wee word of advice for the whole issue of sorry, two ticks. Thank you. Just a wee bit of advice for I'll formally second, and I'll reserve the right. Having an off day this morning, folks. Very sorry about that. But reserve the right.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I think we all recognise that the role of CDL in adult literacy and ESOL and the digital learning is an important strand in ensuring that people have access to lifelong learning. But I think the real strong thing that comes over in this last year is the fact that they are so close to communities has meant that they have been able to make the linkages the council has needed in the last year. And if we look at the corporate plan, it just demonstrates the importance of being in touch with one's communities. And I think that their role has actually demonstrated to us how effective working closer with communities can really be, and in providing the things that communities need on the ground. And like other members of the committee, I'd just like to thank the team for their work and suggest that we need more of this, because it's very definitely the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Evelyn.
My dexterity with this computer will tell you why I have a question. I do want to say, first of all, though, when I saw this written, I was not aware of the amount of work that was going on in the community. And I think many, many others like myself don't really appreciate what's going on locally. And I think it would be a good thing to publicise this in some way, not on the computer, because many people don't access that. But I think we should give ourselves, or the people who have done it, a pat in the back for what they have done and what they have achieved. And I would very much like somebody to work out a way that we can convey this to our communities, that all this is going on and it is worthwhile. A thank you to all the people who have been involved in this. There is one question I do have, though, further down: moving services online and addressing emerging issues for mental health. Now, again, if it's young people, yes, they can access that without any problem. But if we get into the older age ranges, accessing these only adds to your mental health problems. So I would like some thought to be given to how this can be helped, or how people can be helped to do this. I cannot myself envisage a programme where we train absolutely everybody in the Falkirk area on accessing the computer. I may be wrong in that. Anyway, that is my comment. Thank you.
Okay, Evelyn, Mark has volunteered to help answer that question.
It's a good question, Evelyn, actually, because what we've tried to do as a partnership is to try to put in place different approaches to support people's mental health and well-being. And one of them is accessing resources and support digitally, but it's also, as restrictions have allowed, the opportunity to meet up with individuals and basically go for a walk, have time and space for them. So there's a range of opportunities available for each individual to access. For some people, and it's not all young people, I know you've said young people, but you know, a number of young people don't want to access digital stuff, you know, on digital resources online. They would rather meet with a trusted adult individually and do either garden gate type of support or go for a walk with that individual, recognising they need to do it within a socially distant context. And there is older people who require, who wish to access things digitally as well. So it's about having the, I suppose, the right resource at the right time and delivered in the right way for the individuals, and that's what we need to do. And partners are committed to exploring that, particularly with the individuals, about how they would like the service delivered. So if I can offer you that reassurance, Evelyn, that we are looking at that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I'd just like to thank Gary again for the report, and Mark and his team at CLD for the work and the commitment they've showed through this pandemic. Probably without the CLD team, a lot of these groups, which will be over 30 groups that have came into fruition because of this pandemic, and without the CLD team, they would have found it hard to deliver some of the aspects that they're doing. When we mentioned at the very start, convener, about the frontline people who have worked hard through this pandemic, these voluntary groups that have worked and have came to light because of this pandemic are at the forefront of all the gratitude that deserves praise on them, because they're doing it free of charge and because it matters to the community. But without Mark and his team, a lot of these groups wouldn't have been able to take their plans forward. So just like to thank Mark and his team for that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got Michael Rollo, then Laura Murtagh, and then I would really like to close this item and move on, if folks, but Michael, then Laura. Michael, you're on mute. I'm not very sure.
Non-verbal
Right.
communication. I think he wants you to move on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I think Sunday was the last day of British Sign Language Week, but I won't try and attempt to do this in sign. Sorry, I know that Michael's on mute now. I don't want to take over his place on speaking if he wants to come in before me.
the mute, my line across the bottom with the unmute button disappeared. That's why I couldn't unmute myself. Apologies for that. So don't know what the gremlins did. I was just thinking, what I think it's a great report, and I agree with everything that's been said. The situation that was crucial 12 months ago and over the last few months in relation to rolling out food programs and all that kind of stuff has been fantastic. And but I would foresee a different set of circumstances evolving now. Debt, for example, mental health is obviously another one. I know that some of these things are already being addressed there. I know some organisations that are addressing some of these things currently. I know that there's a Christians Against Poverty organisation locally that tries to help people get out of debt, for example, just to name one. There's numerous things. And also aware that Stinismere Football Club have done a tremendous amount of work in the community during the whole pandemic, coordinated a lot of things, and have a vision for being a hub for some of the things that are going on in the future. So just to say that I think there's a different set of needs, a tsunami of mental health and debt coming towards us. And I presume you're looking at these things, Mark, and just would be interested to hear your feedback on a couple of these issues there.
Okay, what I'll maybe do is I'll take some final comments and I'll come back to Mark. Councillor Bissett asked to come in. Can I ask people to be brief because we've got a number of items to get through today, so could you please be quite succinct in your questions and any comments, please. Councillor Murtagh.
Indeed, Convener, and as Michael said, you know, and this committee, I'm unapologetic about mentioning how proud I am of my children and indeed our football club and all that they do in the community. But what Evelyn was saying in terms of the needs of everybody, we talk about GIRFEC a lot, getting it out for every child, but in essence CLD, what CLD do is more about getting it out for every person and every adult and reflecting the different needs. And as I say, mentioning my parents, I know that my mum won't mind being outed as being in her 70s and you know, accessing whether it's Tai Chi, Zumba, Scottish country dancing or whatever online in the living room. But my dad, who is actually younger than my mum, would probably die at the thought. So there's a different range, and what I want to highlight is how throughout this journey in the last year in the pandemic, what has struck me about CLD is not just the range of things that they've done, but how they've adapted. You know, none of us knew coming into this what we were facing and what was going to be needed. But having been on the other side of the fence as somebody who was being, as it were, monitored by CLD and assisted by CLD in providing stuff in the community, it's not just the professionalism and the work ethic of the staff, but the way that each one of these challenges as came across, whether that was to do with mental health, supporting different communities, integrating with CVS, integrating with our partners, encouraging new organisations and getting them up and running, sorting premises, sorting you know, transport, so many challenges. It was the recognition that they didn't have the solutions there on day one, and the adaptability. And Mark and I had many a long conversation and digitally and worked together, and I know that that was replicated throughout. So in a similar way that in Gary's report, when Gary was reflecting on, you know, the things that we've had to learn and adapt to and be forward thinking of and ahead of the game in all that we've done, whether it's in early years or other areas, I think what CLD need to be commended on particularly is how well they have adapted and risen to the challenge and changed and integrated with our partners. And I have every praise, as Councillor Kerr said, for our communities and all the volunteers have done and everybody. But I want to particularly praise Mark and the team for the way that they've engaged and been understanding with the needs of the groups as well, that they needed to have that support ongoing and to change constantly. So my thanks for that particularly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. There wasn't really a question in there, but yes, and I will plead for people to be brief in their comments. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. I'd just like to thank Mark for this excellent report. And I'm glad to see that the level of consultation that was done on it, on Appendix 1, there's a whole raft of organisations that have been involved in this action plan. and I was glad to see the police standard exercise was carried out at Bowness, Grangemouth, Upper Braes, Denny, Larbert, Bournemouth, Langreese, which contributes. The police standard exercise is a great way to understand the needs of the communities, and I would like to thank Mark and his team for the collaboration. And I think what we've seen at the top of this meeting was that, and it was mentioned, you know, the kind of everybody pulled together. Everybody, I don't, too many people to name really, but everybody's worked together. All the community groups, great spirit of community. So thanks to Mark and his team. And I suppose my plea is that maybe officers, since it's such an important CLD is such an important facility, that my plea would be that next year officers didn't bring forward any proposals of budget cuts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll give Mark an opportunity to just briefly come back on the final comments there.
Thank you, Leader and Convener. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Pick up on the point that Michael raised about the priorities shifting and changing. That is certainly the case within the council area, and mental health and well-being has been identified by young people and adults as being a priority going forward for them, and we need to work as a CLD providers and partners to think about how we're going to address some of the issues going forward. Digital exclusion remains a big issue for us to address, and we're addressing that with Connecting Scotland, Connecting Falkirk, and with a lot of private sector organisations who are donating devices and connectivity as well. I don't think food insecurity is going to go away. I think it's going to remain for the next foreseeable future, but also linked to that is going to be poverty, roundabout debt, and then fuel insecurity as well. We're going to have to look at how we're going to do that with and support our communities through that. And a big one will be how we actually support children and young people through their achievement and also their attainment in school, and how we actually develop that as partners and providers as well going forward and build on that, and that links to young people's and adults' employability. So I think that's the priorities that are coming out of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment that's been undertaken in the last year or so across the council area. I think the points that members of the executive have made round about the contribution that the third sector and the community sector have made to begin to respond to COVID is, in my view, second to none across Scotland. And I think they should be commended. It's not just about my service. My service is just an enabler to enable that to happen, along with Falkirk CVS, and the role they've played has been critical going forward as well. And long may that be maintained, and long may communities take on that role. And certainly as a council, we want to try and support them to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and that was a very good way to finish, and a very positive report. So I'll ask members to be happy to accept the report.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We move on to agenda item 8, which is Forth Valley West Lothian Regional Improvement Collaborative, and we'll go to Robert Naylor.
Thanks, Convener. I have a relatively short cover report here to update the executive on the work over the course of this pandemic year. Ordinarily, we bring 2 progress reports each year to the committee, and what's set out here is what has happened, probably particularly from early summer through to the current time. At the start of the pandemic, I think it was very much the case that each of the 4 councils had other immediate things on their mind through the course of April and the early part of May. But thereafter, there was a regrouping of RIC colleagues to do 2 things. One was to develop an education recovery plan, which is included as an appendix to this report. And the other was working with Education Scotland to review our monitoring arrangements, our governance structure, to make sure that we have the right oversight in terms of the progress that's been made. As previously shared with the committee, we have 6 work streams. They're detailed within the Education Recovery Plan, and against each of these, there's a series of actions that have been developed and agreed across the 4 council areas, and that these have been shared widely with head teachers and other stakeholder groups. We've had input from Education Scotland, I think particularly around a collaborative effort to produce digital learning resources. And I think since Christmas, when we have had the requirement for remote learning to be on offer until the very recent past, what we've been able to demonstrate and share is resources that have been developed by effectively the 4 teams, so that we've had resources that didn't need to be replicated authority by authority. We have on the cusp of being delivered an Easter digital programme, which is a RIC offer. So the young people that are coming up to the new exam diet will have support over the Easter holiday to access resources digitally, and we're currently exploring whether or not there'll be any capacity for us to do face-to-face. You'll see in the second appendix, which outlines the governance structure, at the very beginnings of the RIC, we essentially had 4 directors meeting. We then moved into a situation where we were appointing development officers. We then established all the various different teams, looking at each of the 6 areas of progress, principally literacy and numeracy being among the first. But you'll see from the appendix that we now have various different stakeholder reference groups involving not just head teachers, but practitioners on the ground. And also we are moving to a situation where we're going to be engaging much more fully with parents and young people in terms of the feeding into the pyramid that you'll see in the governance structure. The other thing that has developed over the course of the last year or so, and actually had just been established at this just prior to the pandemic, is that we now have an overview group that is made up either of council leaders or portfolio holders from the 4 councils and the 4 chief executives. And the purpose of that group is to twice a year be holding the 4 directors to account, and indeed the lead officer, who currently is a lady by the name of Lorraine Sanda from Clackmannanshire. And that overview group is to make sure that the 4 chief executives and the 4 leaders or portfolio holders are satisfied that the collaborative effort is going in the right direction. I suppose my main comments over the course of the pandemic is that we have made very, very significant progress, particularly in the area of career-long professional learning. We now have an offer that is a RIC offer in terms of making sure that we're not replicating, for example, head teacher training 4 times. We're taking the best of what's available, not just among the 4 authorities, but also from national inputs. We're delivering an awful lot of our teachers training digitally since last summer. And as I mentioned earlier, there's significant materials and resources that have been developed to support learners on the ground. I'll stop there, convener, and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Robert, for your report. I welcome this update because it lets us see the work of the RIC and how important their work is. I think referring to 3.4 of the report, I welcome the fact that we are now including pupils' voices and parents' voices in going forward. I think just as it got Robert touched on there, in governance in the appendix report highlights to me the fact that they're constantly reviewing, reflecting and planning and moving forward, which is exactly what we would like in a regional collaborative, collaborating with each other, not duplicating work and moving forward and getting the best out of everyone that's involved, experiences and expertise. So I'd like to remove the report and thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. In the interest of time, I'm not going to say very much other than to formally second the report and just say how pleased I am that we're starting to see the benefits of the RIC coming forward, and that we see that the collaboration with the staff, we see the ability for them to be able to upskill their professional as skills and then take those into the classroom to the benefits of our young people. And I think that has been a fantastic innovation of the RIC, and it has really been proved to be quite successful for us, certainly in the West Lothian and Forth Valley, and pulling on everybody's experiences. I'll open it up now for questions. Now, I'll apologise because the system is being a wee bit kind of slow this morning and I don't have everybody on the screen. So if I don't see somebody indicating to speak, then please can they just shout and I'll put them on the list. I've not had anybody indicate so far, but I may not just be able to see you. Okay, Councillor Nimmo, I do see you yourselves.
Just a question, convener. Robert, how do you see the long-term implications for the collaborative? Do you see that as a long-term project? It's obviously something that can be adaptable to whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. But I remember a few years ago, we tried to go down the road of shared services between constituent local authorities, and to be honest, it didn't really work. It wasn't effective. Do you see any sort of similar problems with this this project with the collaborative? Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Councillor Nimmo. I think my reflection on this would be that when the concept of the collaboratives first came along, it was very much to develop the idea of sharing good practice, of building on what might be good or strong in one local authority area and perhaps development needed in another. The organisers that were put in place were geographic. So it so happens that we are with Clackmannan and Stirling and West Lothian because of our geography. But I think going forward, I think because we have had the RICs and because that cultural shift took place in terms of us engaging much more directly with our counterparts and our immediate neighbours, what that's meant during COVID is that there's now much more collaborative beyond the RIC. So it's much more normal now for, particularly during the COVID period, for us to be in contact perhaps with people in Angus or in the Ayrshires about particular things that are similar in terms of how we're responding to the pandemic. So, for example, Gary is involved in the ADES Resources Committee, and that means that he, whilst talking to our three RIC partners around some of our planning and our activity in terms of COVID, he's also speaking to people in other parts of the country that maybe have schools of a similar size, that maybe have the same sort of transport issues that we're trying to overcome and so on. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but going forward, I don't really see this as an agenda for some big global shared service education delivery. I think the concept is that we learn from each other, we reach out to each other, and where we can, we share resources, materials, and expertise. And I think that's demonstrable now, particularly in the arena of digital learning.
Okay, thanks for that, Robert. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. I've got Maureen.
Yes. Thank you, convener. Just a very quick comment. I've spoken to a couple of head teachers lately, and they are amazed at the collaborative teaching and learning that's going on in schools at the moment. Also, the fact that a lot more children have access to the internet because of the dongles provided by Falkirk Council.
and if there are any children who are not coming online, they get a friendly phone call from the school just to say, are you okay? Is there a technical issue? That kind of thing. So they are monitoring as well the children and what they're actually doing at home as well. So it's just to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. I think we appreciate that feedback, and we're getting, apologies, we're getting some feedback there. I think that's us now. Okay, is there any other member, or can we approve the report?
Agreed.
We're happy
Agreed.
to agree the report.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. We move on to item 9, which is a consideration of changes to the current home to school transport policy and arrangements, and that's with Gary Greenhorn.
Okay, thank you, Convener. And firstly, apologies, Convener, and to the Executive, because this report was actually written and it was intended to bring forward to the Executive in March 2020. Unfortunately, as everyone knows, went into lockdown. I think the day, or around about the day that Executive was meant to take place, and unfortunately our systems forgot to bring it back, and thanks to Councillor Nimmo for picking up on the role and action log and raising the question why we hadn't done it, so that the report's now before Executive today. The focus on the report was to consider the planning and administration of financial implications that would result in us amending the home to transport policy insofar it would affect children where they stayed at different addresses, either parents' addresses or indeed other members of family at different parts in the week. The considerations we've outlined in section 4. 4.1 summarises the current policy insofar as it affects transport and bus and taxi operators. The key here for us, a bus operator just now, we operate with a scholars pass, which is point to point from A to B. It doesn't change, so any amendment to addresses would require effectively 2 bus or scholars passes to be provided. In the same way that taxi operators often pick up more than one particular young person en route, any change to that for different addresses could mean additional taxi contracts would be required. The challenges that we would face if we had to implement this motion are outlined in section 4.2. 2 addresses does pose significant challenge. We can have addresses where one might be an attachment, one might not be an attachment, one might qualify under the current home to school transport rules, other address may not. Families don't always stick to the rules around what nights or what days children stay, and that in itself leads to communication problems, especially when these things may happen out with hours or over the course of weekends or early in the morning. We're not dealing with an ideal situation, so communication difficulties in contacting people where these arrangements change are significant. There's also separate taxi companies. That reduces the flexibility we've got and the efficiency across the transport network, where we try to minimise empty seats on buses and empty spaces in taxi where we can. The question was asked about, do we have any data on the number of children that are affected? And unfortunately, the answer to that is we don't. There's no requirement for us to hold it. The only data we hold on children is where their sole and main residence is. In summary, it's laid out in section 4.4. If this went ahead, it would lead to inefficiency in the transport. Inefficiency means, unfortunately, additional cost. Probably more importantly, that anything that relies on communication or where there's communication involved, and it could happen quite significantly where there's inflexibility or changes to the normal pattern of where children stay during the week, means that we get a very clunky system. Clunky systems mean confusion and mistakes, and that is not a good system to adopt. Also, there's also precedents that could be set over our current planning and for catchment areas, where the catchment area wholly relies on one address where children reside. So if we change one policy to accept that children can reside in 2 addresses, it opens us up for a significant challenge, perhaps, on our assessment of catchment area, where children are very much deemed to be in one household, and it's for parents to decide where that is based on, for example, the child benefit entitlement. Not everybody gets child benefit because of the financial limits now, but child benefit was one of the obvious things that we used to do in the past that identified where children's sole and main residence was. The 4.6 outlines an interesting development that, as people may know, that the Scottish Government have announced that they intend to introduce free bus travel for under 22s. And whilst at the moment we don't know the exact details of the scheme, this may offer some opportunities to cut down the cost of young children or young people travelling between different addresses and their school. We don't know what it'll mean, but certainly it's something that was worth putting in the paper because it could offer some support to families in certain occasions going forward. So in summary, just to say that this is very much, when we come to policy decisions, some policies really have to be black and white, where there can be no ambiguity, no flexibility, unfortunately, I would have to say. And this is one such example where we can't have any grey matter. Decision has to be made as to where it's black or white. And in this case, unfortunately, we can't have a flexible approach to it. This has to be a policy that's very clear, in the same way that we have policies that affect placing requests and catchment areas assessments. It has to be one clear rule that applies to all. So it's very unfortunate that the professional opinion of officers is that we cannot accept the recommendations that this motion be brought forward, and therefore the proposal is that it is rejected today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Gary. I just read to refer to the recommendations of this report, and you can see from the report that the officers have looked into this fully. There's been a lot of work put into it, and they've looked at it at all different angles. And at this moment in time, we have to, I feel we have to agree the recommendations. Although, as Gary highlighted, there is a little silver lining. Just a wee silver lining at the moment in the fact that the Scottish Government is bringing forward free transport for the under 22s. And as we find out more information about that, then obviously the department will again look at this in detail and how we can help anybody that's in a circumstance where they're struggling to get to school. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Colley. Oh, Councillor Colley's not there. I'll formally second the recommendations and open it up. And I've got Maureen Harkins who's wanting to come in.
Yes. I just wanted to talk about my experience when I was working. I worked in a big school with a huge catchment area, and we had 3 different options for children. Children who were collected by taxi had to go to the school office and were dismissed from there by a member of the office staff. About 4 or 5 teachers supervised children who were being picked up because they went out the main gate, and every other member of staff lined up in the 47 playground to put the children onto 7 different buses. Now, that was really difficult to do and organise, and sometimes the plans changed on a day-to-day basis. So for young children, we always asked the parent to put a letter in the reading pouch so we could check it every day. But sometimes we would get phone calls 10 to 3 in the afternoon. Can we tell wee Jimmy to go on the bus? He's going to his dad's tonight. That was all a different bus. Sometimes the person in the office was trying to get the taxi children organised, and the phone rang and a message was put on the answering machine, which maybe wasn't listened to until 3:15. So then you had the parent on the phone complaining, you didn't get my message, so you had all this to deal with. And the impact on the children was profound, because children were coming into school and were crying by morning break to say, I don't know how I'm going home, I don't know where I'm going tonight. So it was really difficult dealing with all these things. And that was the policy as it is at the moment. I think you can't have a flexible approach because it opens up too many options for the bigger schools with bigger catchment areas. And I think as well, if you're trying to plan things, you can't plan this scenario at all because data can change at any time. Parents can split up. They go to different houses. The different houses could be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or it could next week could be Monday, Tuesday. And also, once the primary children move on to high school, you may have 3 children in primary, 1 in high school, and how are they all going to get home? So I think we need to stay with the status quo, and hopefully, as Adana said, the little silver lining at the end, you know, free transport would be brilliant. But you know, and the final thought is add grandparents into that mixture, you know, and it's just, and that's a daily occurrence in a primary school. It's just horrendous. And even the HMI, when they were in my school, said, I don't know how you do this. I said, well, I've read a lot of World War II history and I enjoy the tactics of Rommel. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Maureen. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be very brief. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Councillor Kerr for bringing this forward. I think it was an important question to posit, and clearly we've arrived at the officers have arrived at conclusions, and we would agree with these conclusions and agree with the recommendations. And I suppose thanks need to go to Mr Harvey for getting this in the budget, and hopefully that will solve the issues that have been raised. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. With regards to the motion that I brought forward, it went that long that the family that I was asking for have left school now, so it doesn't affect them now. But it will affect other families, and probably families that can't afford the bus fares. But looking at the proposal of the Scottish Government in 4.6 regarding free travel for under 23s, hopefully that will erase anything that's any questions, Convener. I have got a question that came up, well, just came up to me when Gary was speaking. If this proposal is introduced and it's free travel for all under 23s, will, I think it'll be a pass, will they be able to use these passes on the school buses?
Councillor Kerr, just to say that we really don't have had any information from the government on how the intention of the new scheme is going to work. But certainly once we do find out that, that's the question that you've asked is one of the questions that we will be asking at the same time, because it's very much at the heart of what we're trying to get the answer to, so we can advise people accordingly. So as soon as we find out about it, then we'll keep people abreast of the situation.
Thanks, Gary. I understand that there isn't any data there, Convener, and I appreciate the work that Gary and Robert and his team put into the report. But as you know, we're there to represent our constituents, and if our constituents are asking questions, the questions have got to be asked. So thank you very much for your work, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Is there any other members? No. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm just very aware now that we're approaching 12 noon, and I would suggest that we just pause now and take us over the 12 noon before starting the next item, if people are content with that, as we are at 11:57.
Agreed.
Agree.
Okay, can I ask everyone to maybe just make sure that they are on mute? Thank you, colleagues. We can now resume our committee with agenda item 10, Scottish Qualifications Authority Attainment of Destinations School Leavers Falkirk 2019-20, and it's David Mackay.
Thank you very much, convener. Apologies, first of all, the bin lorry has just pulled up outside my house and is, as we speak, loading up. So if you can hear that, I do apologise. So thank you very much. So this report in section 1 is a follow-up report in terms of the paper we bring in October annually and regarding the Scottish Qualifications Attainment for Falkirk senior pupils. And the purpose of the report is to provide information on the overall attainment of our young people leaving Falkirk Council secondary schools in 2019 and 2020. The recommendations are detailed in section 2. Background information is similar as previous years and explains the rationale behind this report. However, there is one significant caveat this year in section 3.6 is the impact of COVID-19 on the situation across all of the schools in Falkirk, and particularly on the school leaver data this year. And obviously it's caveated by the pattern of attainment was different this year as it is in previous years, and also therefore there should be some degree of caution with the figures. However, we're monitoring this situation very, very closely. In section 3.8, it also makes reference to the school leaver destination figures, and again there is some impact in relation to COVID on these figures that I'll pick up later on in this report. So in section 4, we look at the considerations, and again the performance of Falkirk Council schools in this report are benchmarked against a number of factors, namely the national average, the virtual comparator, which is the VC in this report, and also against the Forth Valley and West Lothian Regional Improvement Collaborative, which is obviously comparing Falkirk across Stirling, Clacks and West Lothian. Section 4.3 explains about the school leaver destinations, and this year with just under 1,500 young people left Falkirk Council secondary schools, 181 at the end of S4, 388 at the end of S5 and 914 at the end of S6. Section 4.4 then looks at the percentage of the destinations of these young people, looking at the positive destination. A positive destination, members of the committee will remember, are related to higher and further education, training, employment and other kind of engagement processes. It also refers to captures those young people who have not moved on to a positive destination. So this year our figures are 92%, it's actually 92.4% of Falkirk Council's young people have moved into a positive destination. And again, this compares favourably to the virtual comparator, the Regional Improvement Collaborative figure and the Scottish average for this year, placing Scotland 23rd nationally. And we obviously saw a small fall this year from our 95%. Interestingly, this year, of our leaver destination moving into employability, last year we had 31% of our leavers moving into that destination. This year it was 19%, and that was obviously significantly impacted by the factor of COVID. However, we did see a 7% increase of our young people moving into further and higher education. And again, I think that's a significant positive trend that we're seeing for our children and young people. Section 4.9 then looks to have a look at attainment in literacy. And in section 4.10, we first of all look at literacy at level 4, which is showing that Falkirk continues to have a strong performance in literacy and is currently sitting 7th nationally and comparing very favourably with all of the other measures. Section 4.11, we move on to look at level 5 literacy. And again, Falkirk continues to have a strong performance in literacy compared to the other 3 measures. And again, this year we're ranked 13 nationally. And again, that's another strong performance in this year. Section 4.15, we then move on to look at numeracy. And again, we'll look at level 4 numeracy. And this year we are currently sitting 5th nationally with a consistent performance of our schools, and again compared to the other 3 factors, again performing very well. In terms of level 5, we are currently sitting 3rd nationally, and again it's another strong performance by our schools for this particular factor. Section 4.21 looks at closing the poverty-related attainment gap, and members of the committee will remember from previous years we'll look at the little floating bubbles. The size of the little balloons represents the size of the population in each particular measure across SIMD 1 to 10. And what we've always been looking for is the Falkirk bubbles to be floating above the national average, which are the orange bubbles. And again, this year for virtually all of our bubbles, that is the case. And again, the figures compared very favourably to the virtual comparator, the Regional Improvement Collaborative and the National, and currently place Falkirk 7th nationally for this measure. We've seen a slight a widening of the attainment gap this year for Falkirk, but however, we are back in line with the virtual comparator this year, and the graph at the top of page 72 in the report, which is just under section 4.24, demonstrates that visually. Section 4.26 then looks at attainment for all. And in this section, we're looking at the attainment of our lowest 20%, our mid 60% and our upper 20%. And the chart under section 4.28 indicates that Falkirk currently ranked 7th in terms of the tariff points for our lowest attaining 20% of school leavers. And again, we're continuing to see a strong trend there and an increasing gap between ourselves and the Virtual Regional Improvement Collaborative in Scotland. Section 4.29, then we look at the mid 60% of attainment for our school leavers. And again, there's another strong performance by our schools, placing us 7th nationally for this particular measure. And again, outperforming all the various indicators under this measure. The final section in this is 4.31, which is looking at our highest attaining 20% of young people. And again, it's a very strong performance by our schools, and Falkirk is currently this year placed 3rd nationally for this particular measure, with the aggregated tariff points comparing very favourably across the board. Section 4.33 then moves on to look at the SCQF level 6, which is higher, which again is a crucial level of attainment to be achieved by our young people in terms of being a passport to further and higher education. And it's very crucial that we continue to monitor this measure very, very closely. So the first measure looks at 1 or more passes at level 6. And in this measure, Falkirk is currently placed 15th nationally and has remained fairly consistent with our previous performances. The next level is looking at 3 or more qualifications at level 6. And again, the chart shows that Falkirk has continued to grow and improve in this particular measure, and we're comparing favourably with other measures. However, I need to draw attention to the fact that with this measure, Falkirk schools do have other level 6 qualifications that are not taken into account when looking at this. So we've got young people who are doing HNCs, HNDs and other level 6 or 7 equivalent qualifications that are not taken into account. And when we actually do our own internal measures, that it actually then allows us to compare very favourably with all the other measures across the board. So I think we've got another strong performance there. Section 4.40 then looks at vocational qualifications. And again, all of our schools are very keen to ensure that our children and young people develop the appropriate skills and qualities to enable them to be competitive when it moves on to the world of work and further education and employability thereafter school. So section 4.41 looks at the number of our young people who are gaining at least a level 1, level 5 vocational qualification. And again, we've got a very strong performance here by our schools that places Falkirk 2nd highest in Scotland. And for the level 6 qualification in section 4.42, there's 12% of our leavers gaining that, which is the 3rd highest in Scotland. So again, a very strong performance. And I think that's really just an indication of the strength of the breadth and depth of qualifications that are currently on offer across all of our schools, and the importance and the relevance that our schools are taking to make sure that we're preparing our children for that next step into the world of work and beyond. And I'm happy to take any further questions on this report from members. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, David, for your report. I'd just like to say, obviously, as everyone will be well aware, this has not been a normal year, shall we say, for anyone, and our education services have been under extensive pressure. But saying that, we are still continuing to progress, and that's thanks to the hard work that's going in and the communication between children, young people, young learners and our staff. So thanks, and I appreciate that. Obviously, our focus still very much sits on closing that attainment gap, and we are continuing to close that attainment gap, and I appreciate going forward that will always stick with our priority, first and foremost, to support those that need the support to achieve exactly what they wish to achieve. So thank you. I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I'll formally second and reserve the right to come back in.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to any member for any questions. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, a couple of questions, convener, for David. David, you touched on the positive destination side of things in your presentation there. Do we have any indication as to how many of our kids leave education and go into 0 hours contracts? I know there's also cases where they're going into employment and they might have to work a probation period where they're not getting paid for it as well. So do we have any indication as to the numbers involved in that? The other question relates to the attainment side of things in general. There's no indication within the report that I can see as to the impact of the ring-fenced money that goes direct to the head teachers in relation to attainment. I know that money's got to be justified and how it's spent to the Scottish Government. So where is the information relating to this separate pot of money and the impact it's had? There's nothing there. Thanks, convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nimmo. So first of all, in terms of the 0 hours contract and the probation types of contracts, unfortunately, I don't hold that type of information. But what I can do, Councillor, is touch base with Skills Development Scotland to see if they hold that information. And if that is possible, I'll then forward that on to yourself. In relation to the attainment gap and obviously pupil equity funding that schools have been given. Obviously the report here touches on closing the attainment gap, and again that's a graph about the bubbles, which is reporting on the progress being made there. However, we do have a separate report going to scrutiny committee. I think it's either next week or the week after, which is obviously looking at the kind of pupil equity funding and the mechanisms we've got to manage that particular approach and to ensure that there's due diligence and robustness around the spend within our local schools. So that's where that's getting captured, Councillor Nimmo. And obviously those reports will be available for members thereafter.
Well, just on that very point, convener, would it not have been a better idea holding this report back and waiting on the outcome of the scrutiny implications before bringing this forward? Because obviously that additional money could have a serious impact on the attainment figures.
There was a number of debates in relation to this particular report and the timing of it. I don't know, David, do you maybe want to say a wee bit around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge with the scrutiny committee was obviously delayed significantly in terms of the timing because of COVID. That report was actually due, I think it was I'll be stand to be corrected, October, November last year, and it's obviously been brought forward to the next cycle, which is in the next few weeks. So obviously this report is generally reported at this point in time in terms of the insight data being released, and obviously it's a kind of standard item for this particular committee. So based on that, that was the reason that this report was brought forward at its usual slot, and obviously the scrutiny function is separate but yet related to this.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, convener.
Okay, Mr. Neil, I think wants to come back and comment on that.
Just an observation, convener. Councillor Nimmo's question about the impact of pupil equity funding, attainment challenge funding, and there being any direct correlation between that expenditure and attainment of either individual children or groups of children within schools is a very, very difficult thing to map. What can be done is it can be looked in aggregate across the country. And actually just yesterday, Audit Scotland produced a report that was looking at attainment in Scottish schools over the course of the last 5 years. And it does reference where there has been additional spending in the 8 local authorities that get attainment challenge funding, and also has some commentary on the impact of pupil equity funding around closing the attainment gap. So nationally, this is being looked at. And essentially what is being done is that they're looking at, is there an improving trend in Scotland that is coincident with increased funding being put in the hands of local authorities and individual schools? So if it would be helpful, I'd be more than happy to circulate that report. And as I say, it was just published yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I've got Evelyn Crosby and I've got Councillor Reid.
It may seem a small point, but I am aware, because of grandchildren, that people are going into university to courses which do not ultimately lead to employment. And I was told that universities stand alone and it's up to them which courses they offer. I just wondered if that sort of proviso could be given by the guidance teachers or whoever speaks to the students who are going to university, that don't just pick a course which you think will be fun. You do have to think about, will this one lead to employment? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Evelyn. You make a very valid point there, and obviously my colleagues in the pastoral teams in schools are very aware of ensuring that our children and young people are equipped with the best knowledge that they have to make their decisions, because ultimately it's up to each young person to make that decision, but obviously based on the fullest picture that they can. We also have very many opportunities for our pupils to engage in foundation apprenticeships, which then can lead on to graduate apprenticeships, which again, we're really looking to make sure that we equip our young learners for the next steps and to basically secure high paid careers rather than just a job. And it's not to diminish just having a job as anything poor or bad, but equally we're aware that we want to aspire for more for our young people within Falkirk, to make sure that they have got the skills and the information to have an informed decision that leads them into hopefully high paid careers that they then can feed back into the local community, and then that would obviously then support a thriving economy within the Falkirk area.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think Falkirk's done very well compared to other authorities. According to the report by the Audit Commission, the performance has been patchy over Scotland, but we seem to be doing infinitely better than several other authorities. However, the report points out that other data is needed to see if other outcomes should be measured, and those include well-being and self-confidence, particularly after the pandemic. So I don't know how our statisticians are going to assess that particular aspect, but it's certainly central in the audit report.
Thanks very much, Councillor Reid. In relation to that, there is a delay to the launch of the Health and Wellbeing Survey, which is a programme of more regular contact with specific year groups across the pupil population within each authority and within each school. And we're looking to that to then provide us some further rich data that can underpin our decision making. But equally, some of the work that Mark Meakin's been doing with his team through CLD equally has been talking to our young people as well and understanding their experience through particularly lockdown. And we've taken that information into account in terms of our thinking and how we are planning to shape our services in response and support as we move out of lockdown and as we move learning forward across Falkirk Council.
I take it the point is it's just as important for a child to be well after school as to be qualified after school.
Absolutely, and as our children have been returning to school, that's been the priority of our schools, is to basically get them in and to make sure that they are safe, sound and engaged in terms of themselves and their mental health and well-being before we then actually push forward the learning journeys at the appropriate level for each young person. But absolutely, that's a key priority for all of our schools.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
You're on mute.
Apologies. Councillor Murtagh.
Sorry about that. I think what this report demonstrates is, and obviously, this is reflecting of a position in time, and we all know that we are going to face much different challenges coming out of this year and in the following years than what we did when the metrics were assessed for these outcomes. But what I think is really important and really comforting for us all is that what the the I think fairly outstanding at times results and reflections of where Falkirk are in comparison to others is that an excellent basis to build on and shows how well placed we are to move forward and to deal with those challenges. I think that things that are often not seen, and although I would agree with what David Mackay was saying, that the focus is absolutely on the mental health and well-being and the children going back. I certainly never expected to be, as the parent of a 14-year-old, engaging with careers advice and admissions and university departments at this stage in my child's life, and I have to say that the school have been excellent at not just providing bespoke support, but actually going over and above, and there are trained teachers in some of the specifics of different careers that come and give that advice to children, even at a very early level. But I would absolutely 100% emphasise that further and higher education is not just about the eventual outcome of a job, and is for so much more, as I think many in the committee also agree with. But I think that the most important thing that we can take from this report is the performance of our children and our teachers and all involved in gaining these results. But that whilst the whole of Scotland and the whole of the world indeed will face challenges going forward that are different to what they did, we've got an excellent platform to build on, and it's something that the department can be proud of, and everybody involved can build on and adapt to in the months and the years that come forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. I'd just like to thank David for that report. I think it's been a very difficult time for pupils and parents, and I'd just sort of pay a personal tribute to the pupils who have adapted very well and the parents who have engaged in the homeschooling. I think that's been important. I think the rolling out of digital devices has helped. It probably came at a crucial time. So we'll look forward to see what next year brings, but I think these statistics here are pretty good for Falkirk. And I'm glad to see that an increase in vocational qualifications, because there tends to be a talk of somebody going to university, but no, it's not for everybody. So we need that mix of vocational qualifications as well. And certainly, as David mentioned, there's graduate schemes through like INEOS or wherever. You can go to university through your company. So there's other routes. You can start off doing an apprenticeship and work your way through. So I think we do live in times where there's mixed opportunities for people, and there's lifelong learning, which is more than to be welcomed. So I'd just like to ask a question, which is maybe fairly obvious, but have we now eliminated illiteracy and numeracy in school? Thank you.
I think that's quite a challenging question, Councillor Bissett. Obviously, the kind of range of support needs we've got for some of our children and young people will always be a factor there. But in terms of our statistics, we've got very, very strong outcomes there, and our aspiration is that, where possible, every single one of our children who's capable of achieving a level 4 should be getting a level 4 as a minimum in terms of both literacy and their numeracy. And as the data would say that we're actually getting very close to that, and we'll obviously continue to pursue that with every effort in the system. Our schools view literacy and numeracy as obviously a key life skill, and actually the access to unlocking everything else within education. So absolutely, it will remain at the fore of our thinking and our endeavour in this year and the coming years to make sure that Falkirk is the best it possibly can be with these particular measures.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I'd just like to thank David and Robert for the report. As we know, that there wasn't any exams, so the pressure was put on teachers to deliver people's exams, and the children and young adults and their parents have to be commended as well, Convener, as there are challenges regarding homeschooling. Some children and young people have adapted very well to the distance learning, and have came on a lot better than they would have been at the school. But some struggle with the home learning, and getting that balance is right. And I've just to finish off, convener, I think the teachers have been absolutely astonishing, where they've been given guidelines sometimes at the last minute, a week's notice, 2 weeks' notice, and having to completely change the way they work and adapt so that they can deliver education to our children and young people. And I don't think people appreciate how difficult it is to change a timetable in a week or a fortnight's notice. So the teachers are up there for me with the nurses and doctors. They've took the challenge, and with the report that we've got today, it looks like they've met the challenge, and just hopefully that can continue next year as we continue with this horrible pandemic. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. And I think just to finish this particular item, I think that we should take a lot of comfort from the fact that despite the pandemic, there has continued to be a maintenance of where our children have succeeded to get to and pushing forward. And while there may well be some blips, I fully anticipate that will be equalised out as we go forward, and next year we'll see further iteration of this. We will continue to see that attainment gap being closed and our children succeed. And I think just looking at the reports today as we go from early years and that early intervention all the way through to the support that's been provided to families, and indeed the fact that we've got to this point that shows that the programme is working, it is having an effect, it's having a positive effect, and that can only be good for our young people for the future, and good for all of us for the future, because our young people will be our future going forward. They will be the politicians, the nurses, the doctors, the scientists of the future. So I think we want to be able to grow our own much more as we go forward. Are we happy to approve the report?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Councillor Bissett's asking if the two presentations can be circulated to all members. Yes, happy to arrange that. We have around 30 minutes to complete our agenda this morning. We have 2 items, and I would like to give a bit of time for questions on the presentation as well. So my aim is that we will still try and conclude around 1 o'clock today. So again, my plea is to members to be concise in their comments. But we move to item 11 of Connected Falkirk update, and again that's with David Mackay.
Thank you very much, convener. So this report seeks to provide the Education and Children and Young People's Executive with an update on the progress of the Connected Falkirk progress, and also an update on the overall financial position of the programme. The recommendations are set out in section 2. Section 3 provides a background, and members of the committee will be reminded that Connected Falkirk is our ambitious programme that will see personal devices provided to all P6 to S6 pupils, and shared devices in a ratio of 1:5 for all P1 to 5 across all of our schools. And again, the purpose is to use this technology to ensure that we deepen the learning experience that takes place for the young learners, and to better engage those learners and ensure better outcomes. The Connected Falkirk programme sits within the overarching Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow, STET sometimes it's called, strategy, which sits within the Council of Future Communities work stream. So obviously it's a key programme that is a facilitator in terms of a lot of the ambitions that we have across Falkirk. And again, the programme will seek to transform teaching and learning across Falkirk. The programme in section 3.5 details that there was a £9.6 million capital investment to the Connected Falkirk, and £200,000 of funding was allocated to the Falkirk sprint team to enable the rollout of the programme to 22,000 young people and 2,500 staff. Section 4 looks at the considerations and the update in procurement. It provides details in terms of the devices and services where a contract was awarded to XMA Limited back in August 2020 for a 4-year period to August 2024, and the value of the contract was £6.4 million. And there was a further contract regarding connectivity and Wi-Fi that was awarded to Virgin Media Limited in 2020 in October for £1.9 million. Obviously during that period we had significant challenges through COVID that actually delayed the procurement process. However, the outcome was actually in Falkirk's favour, as we were then able to get the latest generation, the 8th generation Apple iPads, rather than the 7th generation that we had initially sought to purchase, and also the latest Wi-Fi 6 standard for this particular project. Section 4.2 gives an update on the device deployment. And basically the work that's been overtaken by the team since November has been moving at pace, not only to roll out the devices in relation to the Connected Falkirk project, but also to roll out the additional devices that were provided through additional funding to secure digital devices to our most vulnerable learners and families. So currently we have just under 1,900 devices that have been delivered to our primary and secondary teaching staff. The report references 1,500 devices that have been delivered to the most vulnerable, but actually the updated figure as of last week was just over 2,000 devices have now been rolled out to our most needy, and 600 internet connectivity packs. These devices are obviously important in terms of the delivery of online learning during the most recent phase of lockdown, and it's enabled our school staff to engage more frequently and to a much greater degree with our young learners during that period. And the connectivity packs have not only allowed the young learners in those households to access the internet, but also the wider family within that household to ensure that they can access wider online resources and supports during this particular period. Section 4.3 looks at the update on connectivity, which is obviously key in terms of the use of the devices in school to make sure that the infrastructure is there to ensure that the devices have access to high-speed broadband to enable colleagues to get the most out of those. To date, there's 58 sites that are covered by the programme. 14 schools have their new internet lines installed and ready. 25 schools have their cabling and groundworks underway, and 19 schools are planned for the next phase with installers. So in terms of the Wi-Fi installations, all of the secondary schools have now had their cabling installed and it's underway, and Victoria Primary School is being used as a reference site for the design of the primary Wi-Fi infrastructure, and that work is progressing well. As I said earlier, the whole project is about facilitating high quality learning and teaching, and section 4.4 updates the committee on the career-long professional learning, which is really the key to unlocking the power of the project, to ensure that all of our staff have got the most advanced skills that are relevant to their own individual needs to enable them to maximise the use of these devices. And the Sprint team have been working with all schools to undertake local assessments to tailor the package of support to their individual need. They've had a mixed blend of online activities plus a range of 20-minute learning sessions to ensure that there's regular ongoing engagement with our teaching staff. And again, to make sure that they are continually understanding what the latest developments are. As part of this project as well, the central team has been now accredited as Apple accredited trainers, and also that's all 4 members of the team have been granted Apple professional learning status as well. So I think that's testament to their commitment to the programme, that they're not only rolling out the devices, but they're undertaking their own CLPL through this process. Section 6 looks at the financial resources, and as I said earlier in the report, there's 9.61 million that was agreed for the programme. And again, that's been rolling out over the term of 4 to 5 year contract, totaling 8.3 million is awarded to devices and connectivity respectively. And the balance of 1.31 will be used to purchase devices in year 5 of the project. And again, the aspiration of this project is really to ensure that we are at the fore of online connectivity and learning, both within school and at home learning. And this project will certainly unlock that potential within Falkirk. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, David. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, David, for that very rapid report there, which is a shame actually, because there is so much information, so much brilliant information in this report that we should be very, very proud of for our children's services within Falkirk Council. We're being spoken about throughout Scotland. I think due to the fact that we've been ahead of the game in some respects, we moved very swiftly back in June to approve finance to ensure that our children's services and the staff within that could put action in place to allow us to purchase the devices and obviously to secure contracts with a Wi-Fi connection, which has been very significant and has been a significant benefit to our staff, to our families throughout Falkirk. So that has been absolutely fantastic. You can see from the report the amount of devices purchased, the Wi-Fi supplied, and this obviously has had a huge impact on our young learners and our ability to keep families and children up to speed during this horrendous time that we've been in. Certainly, I've seen a couple of briefings myself from different high schools, and I'm absolutely blown away with some of the stuff that's going on and the learning that's going on, and that is it's amazing, and I so appreciate everything that is going into all that, and the dedication of our staff is second to none. I think David touched on it there about the training, and that training is so crucial because it's allowed them to these individuals to then support our staff, who in turn obviously support our children and our families. So to me, it's been so ambitious and forward thinking, and I so appreciate that I'm within Falkirk Council Children's Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana. Councillor Crawley.
I'll just be very brief, just to echo that. It's a fantastic work that's going on, and look forward to hearing more reports, and happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Crawley. I'll open up for any questions. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. Just kind of going back up a year or so, we were given presentations on this, the impact that this could have. Succeed today, excel tomorrow, and I don't think there's any one of us that didn't embrace it and say it'd be a great idea. And we were all willing to put the money in, so that money went in at the budget last year, and I think it's been a terrific investment. I think if we hadn't done that, we'd be left behind. So the bus is going that way, we got on the bus, and here's where we are. I think we've stole a march on a lot of other authorities, and it's been crucial at this time to get this rolled out. And I'm glad to see the pace that has went at, and all the devices that are in the hands of teachers and pupils now. So, and there is ongoing support online for teachers to be able to keep up to date with their own learning, So I think that's innovative as well. So my question around, there are a lot of digital devices out there, a lot of IT stuff. So my question is really, do we have enough support for the pupils and for the teachers' IT equipment? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Absolutely. I mean, the Sprint team are very knowledgeable, and what they're looking to do is they're working with each school to build their own capacity to undertake some of that support locally as well. But in terms of the devices, in terms of the maintenance of those devices and any particular issues, the team are very well placed, and obviously linking in with corporate IT as well to ensure that colleagues are very well supported with the devices. I think one of the key advantages is that each device, when the member of staff gets it, it kind of self-builds onto the network for them. And it's a fairly straightforward process. The team have worked very closely with their IT to ensure that that is very much a low resource intensive process, and it's very efficient. So that's really enabled us to progress at the pace that we've been able to do, and also able to then to track the various devices, and any particular issue is flagged up and dealt with swiftly.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Nimmo and then Michael Rollo.
Yep, just thanks, Convener. Just a quick question. It's great to see this project moving forward. I think to a great extent we maybe won a watch with kicking this off as early as we did. But it's good to see that it's moving forward. David, just in relation to the deployment of the 1,500 devices and the 600 internet connectivity packs, would it be possible to get a breakdown of these figures per ward?
I will do my best. I'm not sure how we've got the data collated, Councillor, but I'll have a wee look at it and just to let you know how that's broken down. But obviously they've been deployed in terms of the criteria, in terms of vulnerability. So the team have been very careful to make sure that they've been prioritised according to need. But I will touch base with the team to see whether or not they hold that type of data.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Convener. I echo all the positive comments that have been made earlier, and it's very exciting. I just want to say that when I see 4.4 second bullet point, every school has attended culture and vision workshops. These are very exciting words, I think, going forward. Very, very important, both vision and culture, and particularly in relation to digital technologies and that, because that is the future. So I'm just full of admiration and praise for what's been happening, and echo all the positive comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no further hands, so can we approve the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. We move into our final item, which is a presentation on the Child Poverty Action Plan. This is a report that's been prepared through the Community Planning Partnership and is shared with our partners, and Sally Buchanan has come along today to be able to present to us on the report and the action plan. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Convener, and if I can just share my screen, I can hopefully take you through the presentation. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I'm now standing between you and your lunch today. That's never a welcome slot. Okay, just trying to get the presentation. There we go. Are you now able to see the presentation? Yep, good. I can see nods. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sally Buchanan and I'm the Fairer Falkirk Senior Coordinator. I've got responsibility for pulling together Falkirk's Child Poverty Action Report. I'm part of the communities team within Housing and Communities, but I think it's very important to emphasise that this is very much a partnership report and partnership piece of work between the Council, the NHS and the third sector. So today I will give you a brief overview of the report and then take any questions that anyone has on this. So in terms of this report, I think like many things, including some that have already been spoken about at this meeting this morning, this report has been impacted by COVID. So it does report activity up to March 2020 and our actions for the year 2020-2021. We had been working on this report back in February last year, but COVID got in the way. Additionally, we were planning to do a lot more engagement with people who had lived experience of poverty as part of identifying and defining the actions for this work. And again, that has been impacted by the pandemic. However, back in June last year, we re-established our working group on this piece of work, recognising that the need to do this was greater than ever, given the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on people in a low income. The group worked to pull together our achievements from 1920, as well as looking at how COVID had impacted on our priorities going forward. We held an online workshop in September last year, and I'm delighted that we had over 20 participants from partner agencies, the third sector and council services. We used that session to present our findings and validate our work around our priority groups, and then to move on to look at what outcomes we want to achieve going forward and what actions are required to do so. I think it's fair to say the report is weaker on the engagement side of things than we had hoped, but going forward we will build on the engagement work that is taking place around the Falkirk Plan. So this report was approved by the Community Planning Partnership last month and is now available on the Council website. So why are we doing this? Well, addressing child poverty has been a clear commitment of both Falkirk Council and the Falkirk Community Planning Partnership for a number of years. However, Scottish Government set national targets across their 4 principal measures of poverty, as shown in this diagram, and these include interim target levels of child poverty by 2023-24, as well as a final target of 10% of children in Scotland experiencing relative poverty by 2030. As part of their work towards meeting these targets, the Scottish Government require all local authorities to report annually in partnership with their NHS board on what they are doing to address child poverty. So this report is Falkirk's second annual Child Poverty Action Report. In terms of the scale of the challenge locally, Falkirk is neither one of the worst nor one of the best councils when it comes to child poverty, and actually we tend to sit very close to the Scottish average. However, given that that average is 1 in 4 children in the area and living in poverty, I think we'd all agree that this is something we would want to improve on. There has been a lot of work looking at the impact that COVID has had on people in a low income, and research by the Save the Children Fund and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation showed that 7 in 10 families across Scotland who had been surveyed about the impact of COVID-19 had had to cut back on food and other essentials, and 51% had fallen behind on rent and other household bills. I think there is a growing body of evidence about the impact that COVID has had on child poverty, and unfortunately the flip side of that being the likelihood of having a worse experience of COVID if indeed you are living in a low income or in an area of deprivation. So whilst our actions in the report will support many people on a low income across the Falkirk area, we have identified 4 groups that we will prioritise over the coming year. These groups have been selected due to the particular impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on them and the understanding that we have gained both from national and local research around the impact that the pandemic has had. I think it's quite clear the situation for young people has been particularly challenging. We know that any period of unemployment at a young age can have long-term scarring effects with implications for economic, health and social outcomes. Unfortunately, youth unemployment is expected to rise, and it's estimated that we could be looking at a further 1,110 young people becoming unemployed in the Falkirk area over the next year as a result of COVID. Larger families are more likely to be living in poverty than families with fewer children. Across the Falkirk area, we have over 2,000 families with 3+ children, so we know that they are at a greater risk of poverty, especially during things like school closures, where that impacts on a parent's ability to work. And lone parents, COVID has been especially challenging for single parents and the children as they rely on one income and they are without the support of another adult in the household to balance childcare arrangements, homeschooling, supermarket trips and any additional caring responsibilities. And care experienced young people who have been a target for prioritisation in terms of poverty work within Falkirk for a long time. So, just to briefly take you through some of the actions that we have included going forward for 21 to 23, we are looking at outcomes over 3 years with a 1-year action plan to look at what we need to do over the next year to get us there. I don't plan to go into a huge amount of detail on these. They are all in the report alongside what we achieved in 2019-2020. But just to give you a brief overview, so we have actions around increasing income from employment for young people and families. Many of these actions are about the difference that we can make if we work together in partnership. So for example, our Parental Employability Support Fund work is already underway by the service responsible for that, but by working as a partnership, we're looking at how we can maximise the impact that that work will have, looking at opportunities to promote that work to people who will benefit from it. For example, using our NHS health visitors or third sector volunteers who are working directly with families to encourage them to make use of this fund. So raising awareness of it and making sure that we're putting the linkages across. We have a series of actions to reduce the cost of living for young people and families. Again, many things that are underway already, but where we can actually maximise the impact that they will have by working in partnership to draw them to attention of the people who will benefit from them most, with a particular emphasis on the groups that we have prioritised for our actions. And the final area is around actions to increase income from benefits and entitlements for young people and their families. Again, these aren't new, but they're about maximising the impact of these areas. Income maximisation advice, for example, is available through both the Council's community advice services and our 3 area citizens advice bureaus. But we can make sure that our frontline staff who are working with people who are benefiting from this, who may benefit from this support, are aware of it and how to refer on to these services. We can really make sure that that support is reaching those who need it most. So that really was just a very quick rattle through of the Child Poverty Action Report. The link is in the presentation, and I'm happy that this presentation is shared if that would be useful. And I'm more than happy if anyone's got any questions that they get in touch with me directly on that. But finally, before we finish up today and before you get to go and get your lunch, I just thought it would be useful to give a bit of information on some of the specific work. Oh, sorry, I clicked into the report. Hold on a minute. There we go. I thought it would be useful to give you a bit more information about some of the direct actions that the Council is currently taking. So whilst the report details out a lot of our partnership work, clearly the Council is also doing a lot of work to address poverty, which isn't included in the Child Poverty Action Report, as a lot of that is our business as usual, rather than the additional partnership working. So I wanted to just give you a brief summary of some of the work that has taken place, particularly to support people with some of the additional funding that we have received due to the pandemic. So due to COVID, and when I say we here, I mean all of us in the broadest sense. I'm not for 1 minute trying to claim that my service has done all of this. There's been a huge amount of work across the Council. So across the Council, we have provided free school meal direct payments during school holidays and school closures. And these have gone out to an additional 1,300 pupils who are not actually covered by the national eligibility, but who are covered by our local eligibility here in Falkirk. We also extended the £100 Winter Support Fund payment to those 1,300 pupils who are in receipt of free school meals and would not have got that from the national eligibility. We are now looking to take a similar approach to the further spring payment that is also being extended into the early years. We have provided additional money to our local food community aid providers via a partnership work with CBS Falkirk, and we have also worked in partnership to have a volunteer expenses fund to make sure that people are reimbursed for the expenses they incur while supporting people in their communities. We have allocated £100,000 to support low-income households experiencing fuel poverty. These are households who may be self-isolating, shielding. We have now moved on to look at off-gas households, and shortly we'll be looking at those in temporary accommodation. We have supported additional income maximisation checks to make sure that we've got capacity to help people apply for benefits. We know that many people now are having to apply for benefits who may never have applied for benefits before and don't really know where to start with accessing that. So we've got some additional capacity within our Citizens Advice Bureaus in order to provide a bit more extra help. And finally, we've recently set up some work around tackling digital exclusion. This links into the previous conversation that we've just had around the Connecting Falkirk conversation. So we have set up a fund that can support people short term, but with the cost of staying connected, particularly during the current restrictions. I think it's fair to say that we've all been using technology to stay connected to services, to friends, to family during the restrictions. So we've got a connectivity and data top-up fund that can provide a small payment to households on a low income to help them with the additional cost of staying connected. This fund was only launched 3 weeks ago and has already supported over 200 households. We have set up a short COVID-19 Digital Exclusion Fund, offering grants of up to £5,000 to organisations and services to support individuals who are digitally excluded. This builds on the model of Connecting Scotland, where devices and connectivity are provided to those who really need it most. And we are looking to assess those applications this afternoon and hope to make sure that that funding gets out shortly. And finally, we launched online ordering for free period products. Again, this was launched just in the last couple of weeks, and actually had some really good publicity last week. I'm delighted that resulting from that publicity, we received over 900 orders just in the last week for online period products. So I think that's really, really helpful and a really great service. We've put that in place, recognising that the buildings that we normally provide these products in are closed, or many of them are closed at the moment due to the current restrictions. But I think we need to look at demand and how that's gone and the budget and see if there's any way that that can be continued, at least while the restrictions are in place, but potentially post restrictions as well. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I'm more than happy to take any questions that anyone has, and apologies that was a very quick rattle through.
Thank you, Sally, and I do appreciate that you've come at the end of the agenda of a long, busy morning, but it's been a very good morning, and this fits quite well with a lot of the discussions that we've had this morning. I think making sure that we've got targeted funding, lifting families out of poverty, which will directly then impact positively on the children and lifting them out of that poverty trap is the right thing to do, and it's taking that more holistic approach. I think we have to be very mindful in the design of our policies to make sure that they positively impact on those to continue to lift people out of poverty, and we just need to make care that we don't inadvertently or adversely affect those that are on the lowest income, particularly right now, and that's why we just need to reflect and make sure that the additional support is targeted accordingly. Also, I think we've recognised that working collaboratively with our partners in health and in the third sector, we can achieve far more than we can individually. And as a result, having a single point of entry, and doesn't matter where you come in, you're able to access all of the services, is something that we are going to look to escalate further, because that's the right thing to do, and that way doesn't matter who an individual discloses that they are having difficulties to, they can direct them to help and be able to help them on that journey to help lift them back out of that difficult place. So I thank Sally for coming along and giving us the presentation today. We have a short time, maybe 10 minutes, whereby if there's questions that anybody has, we're happy to take them just now. Of course, if we don't get through all the questions, then Sally's happy to be contacted, but I'll open it up for any questions from members. Okay, I've got Karen Procheck, then Councillor Reid.
Hi there, thanks Sally. Through my own work, I've done a lot of work on poverty, and I was surprised that disability wasn't mentioned in one of your priority groups. Is this something that you are focusing on? Obviously we all know about the disability price tag that gets put onto a lot of families where there is a disability within the family, and obviously a lot of families are unable to work because of their care and responsibilities, and that's just been highlighted through the pandemic. So I was just wondering if that was getting focused on in any kind of way within Falkirk Council.
Thank you for the question, and it's a fair one. Absolutely, households living with disabilities are highlighted as one of our priority groups from our poverty strategy towards a fairer Falkirk, and indeed in our first Child Poverty Action Report. In this one, I was pulling out, or we have pulled out, priority groups on the particular impact that COVID has had, and we've selected those ones selected from the workshop. That was the ones that came up at the workshop as a priority over the first year, over the next year. That doesn't mean we're excluding other groups, and it doesn't mean we won't move on to look, or the intention is we will move on to look at other areas going forward. And other groups. So it's not at the exclusion of other groups. Absolutely, I agree with you around the challenges for households living with disabilities. Those ones that I highlighted in the report came out of our workshop in terms of the particular impact that COVID had on them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yes, this is certainly not a political party matter. I think everybody's unanimous in their views. The Child Poverty Act went through agreed unanimously, I think, and everything approved since then has been agreed unanimously. However, poverty is relative. I don't want to do a Monty Python sketch, but poverty when I grew up was far worse than it is today, but relatively it wasn't. I think it's true at one time over 60% of people in Scotland were in poverty. However, a forecast from Roundtree and others is that it will probably rise from 23% to 29%. And in order to meet the Scottish target, the current percentage would have to reduce by a quarter. Now, that's not going to be possible, and I emphasise I'm not making a party point in that regard. Could you tell me how many people are in persistent poverty? In other words, they've been in this state for, is it longer than 5 years, 3 years?
I don't have those figures to hand. I can certainly look into that and follow back up, share that information back with the committee, but I wouldn't like to put a figure on it just now. I don't have those figures to hand.
Right. I think nationally the 23 drops to about 11%, I think. And as a lot of us know, that can be a generational thing. We knew their grandfather, their father before them. Do we identify those particular families that have a generational problem?
It's not something that I'm directly aware of any work around, although I suspect our frontline services will be well aware of families and generational issues. Perhaps those in children's services and children's services social work, I'm sure, will be quite aware of some families for which it's a challenge. What we have got and are currently working on is a new system that allows us to look at data across our whole area. This is being led by our Revenues and Benefits Advice Hub team, but will allow us to really target our services by identifying households, particularly households that may be missing out on particular benefits, or households are experiencing a particular challenge around their finances. And that new system will allow us to really take a kind of better view and a better analysis around particular households and make sure we're targeting services towards them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you, and there's much in that presentation which was really excellent and heartening to hear. So thanks to Sally. I was really heartened that you highlighted the period products and the availability of them online, and in particular Councillor Meiklejohn, when it was available, flagged this up to me that I would be pleased about this in particular, that there are reusable products that are also available to order online and more environmentally friendly products overall. And I think that it's important that to emphasise that those are available, and that you know, we all sat through most of us sat through a really important presentation on how we are you know, fixing the council or setting going forward in the council to do with climate change, and that we need to take that across every single one of our services and our initiatives that we provide. And I wondered, I mean, I think that obviously the period products affect very much child poverty in that sense, and particularly, you know, it can come as a great shock to parents when suddenly their children enter into that phase, and obviously it's an outlay for parents to then purchase a set of reusable period products that might, but that in the same way that as we know that with reusable nappies and reusable wipe sets actually saves money over the long term, as well as the importance of that from an environmental perspective. And I know that in our public buildings, we very much up until the pandemic provided the disposable elements, and it's much more difficult and more expensive to provide you know, reusable products because by their nature they are more expensive to provide. So I wondered what work we could do around that in terms of when we come out of the pandemic phase. And you said we want to continue the kind of online ordering system, whether we could maybe focus on that environmental element, but also just in general the raising awareness of that, and as well to sort of mention, and that while we're talking about the reusable period products, that obviously from a child poverty perspective, we know that you know, nappies are a huge outlay, and perhaps I know there's various voluntary groups that work in the Falkirk area, but perhaps that is also something that we could look to assist with information on, in terms of the outlay that you know that causes, because it does save money over the lifetime of a child and a toddler, and reusable wipes as well as fit environmental objectives. So just wondered if you could maybe comment on that, or say whether there's more room for development in that with our wider environmental objectives also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the online ordering gave us a really good opportunity to make sure that the more environmentally friendly products were included in there. In terms of the products that we are providing across buildings as well, they are all from Hey Girls, who provide products that are plastic free. Even the non-reusable products are plastic free. So at least that's a step in the right direction. But yes, I was quite excited by the opportunity that the online ordering gave us to really kind of promote the reusable products as well. As you say, the cost of providing them into our buildings is something, and they're quite specific in terms of what somebody might wish to buy and different sizes and things, which is why I think actually being able to place a personal order and have that delivered to your own door makes sense when it comes to that kind of product. I'm more than happy to look at how we promote that a bit wider, and particularly as we, if we do have to restrict the online ordering in the future, then yes, actually look at potentially restrict that to being the reusable products. And if you're looking for the more disposable single-use products, you can collect them from public buildings. I think that would be a sensible approach if and when we get to the stage of having to restrict the online ordering. At the moment, I'm pleased to say at the moment we've got the budget to continue it and just closely monitor where we are with it. So that's good.
Okay, thanks. All it remains, very briefly, Robert, very briefly.
Sorry, Convener. I'd just like to thank Sally for that report. I mean, I've spoken to Sally in the past about poverty, and she's always brings forward good information. I'm glad we live in a society where we've got away from the undeserving poor and the deserving poor, and everybody deserves a fair crack of the whip. Clearly, poverty and educational performance is connected, so it's vitally important that we get on top of this. And I'm just glad that we are doing this work. And as Councillor Reid said, we're all behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that kind of brings us to a conclusion. So thank you, Sally, for that. And thank you for the work that you've put into pulling the action plan together, particularly over this difficult time, and making it very relevant to our recovery programme going forward. So all it remains to do is to thank the members of the committee this morning for their patience in getting through the business. We've had a very busy morning, but everybody's worked very hard in going through these reports and moving things forward. So I'll now let people get away, get a cup of tea, cup of coffee and some lunch, and thank you very much.